Let's end the end of this very, very interesting year as strong as we can so that we can enter this new year with as much energy and readiness as humanly possible. And this video isn't just designed to give you a forecast based on your rising sign, which will go over the areas of life that will be affected by the energy of the month, but I will also be providing a forecast based on your sun placement, your moon, your Mercury, your Venus, your Mars, your Jupiter, and your Saturn. Yes, all of the major inner planets, because it kind of helps you to understand how the energy could be affecting you on a more internal level, which will really help you become ready for the month ahead to know what to expect. And I will also be providing applicable tips and tricks for all of these placements so that not only do you kind of know what's happening, but you know how to handle the different energies. And look, I'm not gonna lie, December's energy could feel a little bit scattered at times, but it could also feel like, like you're hitting the gas and it's being hit on a lot of fronts, but the brakes are also being slammed on other fronts, and it's weird and it's conflicting. But this is truly a month to learn how to make the magic happen in our lives, to nurture ideas and to cut through the fog, through the adversity. And it's kind of like that testing ground on the Hunger Games, although hopefully the energy is a lot calmer than the Hunger Games. I promise it's not gonna be that bad, or I hope it's not that bad. Oh God. Okay, just forget I talked about it. Point is, it's a time to experiment, to test our ideas against the chaotic nature of life, and to ensure our thoughts and our ideas are grounded in reality. Because if something's not working, it's also the perfect time to suss that out, cut it out, and to fix it. And if the energy of December is understood correctly, it could be a massive month of awakening, but also taking inspired yet structured action when it comes to going after our dreams, whether the dream just involves experiencing a little bit of stability. Maybe we just want to be calm and that's it, and that's a dream we can go after. Or whether the dream is more ambitious and we really want to go out there and make something big with our lives. And before I go into the very detailed forecast, which I do have timestamps for down in the description, I do have an overall December forecast that I will be going into directly after this little segment that will break down the month of December on like an overall social and collective level, just so you understand, what's going on for everybody. How does that look? And then once you watch your personalized forecast, you will understand where you fit in that puzzle. And if you like detailed forecast videos like this one or detailed astrological tutorials, please give this video a like, please subscribe to the channel. It lets me and the algorithm know that this type of content is your jam, which helps me to know that I'm doing a good job. It also helps you if you want videos like this in the future, because the algorithm will be like, yo, this person likes this stuff, I'm gonna give them more of that. And that is never a bad thing, especially if you like the videos. And now let's get into it in 3, 2, 1, go. Starting off December, we will be starting off the month big because we will be having the full moon in Gemini. We're starting off very mentally busy, and the vibe of this transit, it's kind of like a light bulb moment where maybe the light bulb above your head goes ding and it goes off, and it could be a moment where maybe the collective mental fog clears, or at the very worst, everyone's thoughts get like very mentally busy. It's a very like chatty and mentally busy and mentally stimulating transit. It could feel like maybe everybody wants to talk more, maybe they want to share news, maybe they want to finalize a decision, but at the very least, it's very busy. It's like a buzzy release of information, and it could be a great time to sort of link that missing puzzle piece, but also to finally click ideas into place. Like maybe there's like ideas you've been developing over the past while and you don't really know what to do, and there's that one piece of missing information. This transit could actually give you that missing puzzle piece. And obviously at the worst, this could lead to, people really overthinking situations, maybe like confusing situations. For some people, there could be deception involved, but I don't want to scare you right off the bat. I would just, gather the facts before making conclusions during this transit. And with this moon being ruled by Mercury, the energy is very fast, and so there will be no room for guessing. This is about seeing things in a little bit more of a black and white setting. And so, for example, maybe you finally send that text message that you've been overthinking for weeks because you finally know how to phrase it and what to say. Or maybe like a confusing situation in your life. It could regard anything. I would look at the house that Gemini's in your chart. It could be, with loved ones. It could be with your spouse. It could be with your friends. It could be with your job. It could just be with your thought patterns in general. Whatever it may be, that confusing situation will now sort of, begin to become resolved, because that answer you've been looking for could be clicked into place as long as you step back and observe the facts. But the warning is avoid word vomit at this time. Don't just say things because you think them, because you will be thinking a lot at this time. And it is very easy to fall fall into that gossipy trap just to like fill the silence or just to, make things seem important. But the opportunity is to use this clarity to close a mental tab in your life that has been draining your battery. So just make the decision that you want to make in whatever area of life that you need to make that decision in, and then move on. And then going to December 8th, we have Mars in Sagittarius making a square to Saturn in Pisces. And the vibe in this, okay, imagine this. Imagine trying to run a marathon, but you keep having to stop every mile to tie your shoes, or you ate a little bit too much before and you get that side stitch and you want to throw up and your heart is beating fast, whatever it may be. And so this transit could feel like a frustrating, you got to go now, but actually you got to wait. And so you feel like you need to go, but there is some restriction being put on that with Saturn. And collectively, there is almost this desire to push forward and take risks, but the external rules or the obligations or maybe like vagueness of a situation could like trip you up a little bit. But this is what I want to say about this transit, okay? Because there could be like a feeling of impulsiveness in the air, like people want to do something, but they feel restricted. Some people are still going to try to act and do things anyway. And I don't want to scare you when I say this. All I want to say is, be careful when you go out in public, because I know lately there have been so many people who have been a little bit too impulsive with their actions. And I feel like this is an instance where, drivers are going to be reckless, or who else knows how that recklessness could really turn up. And so if you can kind of bunker down, this isn't to scare you, I promise, but it would be helpful just so, you're not really pulled into other people's messes. But like in terms of your own personal life, it's like maybe you get, excited to book a trip or to like start a course or to start a new chapter in your life. But then you realize like your bank account or your work schedule won't allow it yet. And so it's like you want to do this thing, but you feel that frustration of being held back maybe a little bit, or maybe you like try to launch something, but then maybe, other people start to give you feedback about all of the flaws about your project, and it makes you overthink it. And then you kind of feel like you're stopped in your tracks, even though you just want to go. And so the warning, don't try to force a door open if it's locked, because pushing harder right now will only break the handle, or it could break your arm off. And that's kind of a metaphor. I hope you take that as a metaphor. I don't mean literal, but the opportunity is to use the delay to check your foundation, because if you slow down now, you will build something that doesn't collapse later. That is the best way to use this energy. And then such a relieving transit will come after this, because on December 10th, we have Neptune going direct in Pisces. And at the same time that this Pisces Neptune is going direct, it will be making a trine to retrograde Jupiter in Cancer, but also Mercury and Lilith in Scorpio. And anytime an event happens, it kind of sets the mood for that direct motion. So that's why I want to mention this. And so the vibe of this is that the cosmic fog that's kind of swirling in the air, it doesn't just lift, it evaporates, and it kind of reveals this beautiful rainbow that is very pretty. And then your thoughts are all clear, and then everything that seems a little bit fuzzy may start to like slowly, clear up. It's not like a aha type of clear up, if that makes sense. It's more of like a I can see again. It's kind of like that clear up. And because of the grand water trine happening at this time, there's been a lot of grand water trines, but this will be helped by Neptune being direct. It kind of harmonizes your intuition with your intellect. Your creative visions could flow more at this time. Your gut feelings could be more accurate at this time, but also your gut feeling will be hyper logical. And so if you have a feeling about something and your thoughts are also kind of aligned with that gut feeling, listen to it. And so good examples on how this could play out, for example, is maybe you like wake up from a dream, for example, that gives you an exact answer to a problem you were worried about. Or maybe you have a heart-to-heart conversation where you really feel heard and understood. But also when it comes to, maybe your friendships or your bosses or the outside world, maybe you're just able to see, the landscape of the world more clearly. And if you're going to see it clearly, other people are going to see it more clearly as well. I know there's been a lot of, how do I describe this? The mask over the eyes. I know that's been a big energy. I'm not saying that's going to clear up, but it could clear up to a little bit of a degree at the very least. But the warning for this transit is it's very easy to idealize a situation or a person. So enjoy the magic, but don't really sign any contracts or anything without reading the fine print. But the opportunity is to trust your intuition and your logic, because if something feels right in your bones, it probably will be, especially because Neptune loves being in Pisces. But also, obviously, you need to balance that head with that heart. But it will be easier to do it at this time. And then also on the 10th, we will be having Mercury in Scorpio, making it in opposition once again to Uranus in Taurus. And that Mercury will also be conjunct Lilith. And this has happened a few times because Mercury did go back in retrograde in Scorpio, and then it went direct, and now it's going back to the end of Scorpio before it goes into Sagittarius again. This isn't the first time it's happened, but it could be a saga of what's happened in November for you. And this is kind of like a shock to your system. Maybe the energy feels electric, a little bit nervous or rebellious. And so maybe there's like sudden things in the news that make you go, oh my God, or there's like an internet outage or a power outage. Oh my God, wait, I just remembered something. Do you guys remember that Cloudflare outage? If you don't remember, I would look it up, but it kind of, affected things like ChatGPT and other big platforms where there's this massive outage that actually happened the last time that Mercury-Uranus opposition was taking place when Mercury went retrograde. Look it up. I cannot lie about that. And so something like that could be coming up again. Not to scare you or anything, just pay attention to the news. But also, if you have any conversations, they could go from 0 to 100 in an instant. Maybe people are blurting out truths that they usually keep quiet or polite. You could see, some big figures start to speak up about some things. It could be a very rebellious energy, especially in the news, but even in your life. And so because Lilith is involved, this kind of, maybe adds a little bit of like a taboo undertone to what could be happening. And so maybe you can expect some very raw truths that kind of go against the status quo to really be brought up. And so maybe some universal examples on how this can play out. Maybe, for example, you inadvertently find out a secret or a piece of news that really changes your plans for the week. Or maybe you feel like a sudden, very physical urge to quit something. Maybe you quit a subscription. Maybe you quit like a habit. Maybe you quit like eating desserts or eating fried foods. I will never quit eating fried foods. I don't care what people say. Or maybe you like quit a commitment because it really stifles you and it doesn't make you feel good and it feels controlling over your life. But your nervous system could be fried at this time. So watch out for anxiety spikes. Keep yourself grounded and don't snap at people just because you feel restless unless they deserve it, which some people do. Actually, no, I don't want to encourage you to do that. Stay grounded if you can and really, speak with strength, but don't speak, with volume in attempts to overpower people. But the opportunity, use this bolt of lightning to maybe break a mental pattern that you want to break because it's a perfect day to have a breakthrough idea that really solves an old problem. And then the next day we have Mercury re-entering Sagittarius. And so the conversation and the thought patterns of the collective kind of shift from this deep and heavy scorpionic energy to something more loud and broad and optimistic. The collective mood could lighten in some fronts, but Sagittarius is also those people who love to speak on their beliefs and they love to speak loud and confident about it, but be like confidently wrong. But we also could become like a little bit looser with the details. So it could feel like you're walking out of a dark cave into the bright sunlight and you want to see everything at once, but you can't quite do that. And I would watch out for like loose lips at this time because you could want to like speak about something, but you got to think through the logistics before you speak it out. And because Mercury's in detriment here, it means prioritizing the big picture over accuracy overall. But if something does require detail, really take your time with it. And so maybe, for example, you find yourself making like plans for next year, like maybe you want to like learn a new language, for example, or learn a new craft, but you don't actually check if you have the time or the logistics behind it. That's a mistake that could be made. Or maybe conversations with friends or family or loved ones could become more lighthearted and funny, but they could also become a little bit political, but they will also potentially be very philosophical. And so the warning, don't overpromise when you can't deliver. Make sure anything you promise that you're going to do is something you know with 100% certainty that you can do it. But the opportunity is that this is the best time to really brainstorm and visualize big picture ideas. It's a good time to really, expand your horizons, explore topics you never explored before, explore your own ideas, and let yourself think bigger than you're usually allowed to do, like in your own head. Like this is the time where if you want to dream big, do it. And then on the 14th, we have Mars and Sagittarius making an exact square to Neptune and Pisces. I do want to note that the squares from Mars to Neptune and Saturn, this transit, it's not just on the exact day that I'm stating. It'll probably be felt for like a week or two. So just keep that in mind when I'm talking about this. And so if Mars squared Saturn, for example, was like you're hitting a wall, Mars squared Neptune, it's kind of like punching a cloud. Like you swing towards that cloud, you're like, get out of my way, I can't see. And then you get tired even though you're punching nothing. So you could, be mad at things that don't actually exist. It's like, how you used to like fabricate scenarios in your head, or maybe you still do that today. And then in your own like scenario where you're dreaming up your own little fantasy, like some character in that fantasy does something bad and then you're like mad at them. Or if you've ever had a dream about a spouse and they like cheat on you in the dream and then you're like mad at them in real life, that's kind of what the energy of this transit could feel like. But also maybe your energy levels could dip. Like you could feel a lack of motivation. Maybe you question why you're even doing what you're doing. And it's because, maybe you feel like this, your dreams are kind of useless. That's like the worst way that this can play out. But it's also such a great time to rest your energy because you could feel, a little bit lazy that day. But maybe that laziness is good because you've been overworking yourself. And this is one thing that I used to realize because I used to overwork myself, but I used to not do a lot. I used to be in my bed all day or be at home all day, but I would still exhaust myself either with my thoughts or, maybe my habits weren't the best. And so there is like a bit benefit to really giving yourself that permission to rest, because no matter what your day looks like, you could need it and you could honestly feel guilty for not allowing yourself to have that. This is the day to not feel guilty. I just checked because I wanted to know. This is on a Sunday. This is the perfect day to be lazy. Okay, thank goodness this is happening on a Sunday, because you need to rest on this day if you can. But the warning, avoid acting on paranoia or suspicion if you have anything that is like really raising suspicion at this time, because your radar could be a little bit off and you could be fighting that ghost that isn't really there. Then on the 15th, Mars enters Capricorn, which is actually, this is a great transit. It's almost like your adult self has entered the room, because of Mars and Sagittarius was, you're channeling that kid energy a little bit. Now you're an adult, but don't worry. It's okay to be an adult, because adults get money and they get to do what they want. And so the scattered erratic energy of the last few weeks will vanish, and it's replaced by this cool, almost like calculated drive. Remember, Mars likes being in Capricorn. It's exalted in Capricorn. So the collective, maybe they like stop talking about what they want to do, and they actually start to do the work required to get it. And this could apply to you as well. And so because Mars, like I said, is exalted, it means it operates at its best here, or near its best. It's very efficient. It's very patient. It's very strong. You'll feel a lot less rushed in whatever it is that you're doing. And so an example, like maybe you suddenly find the discipline to actually stick to that gym routine or that budget or that diet that seemed just impossible a week ago. Or maybe at work, you stop complaining about a project and you just like start doing it. Not that complaining is bad. Sometimes it's needed, but I feel like this is more of a, if you need to put your head down and get to work, you will be more willing to do it. And so the warning of this transit, though, you could become very cold or ruthless in the pursuit of your goals. This is something that could happen. So don't steamroll people if this is something that, is a possibility, but also don't steamroll yourself. Don't burn yourself out. But the opportunity, this is a good time to tackle the hardest, most boring task on your to-do list, because you're going to have the stamina to do it, and you are going to do it right, and you're going to have the patience, and then you're not going to have to worry about it again. And so that is a great opportunity, and this will last for a month, and it'll enter into the new year in Capricorn, and we get to carry this productive energy with us to start a new year right. And then going to the 19th, we have the new moon in Sagittarius. At the same time, this will be conjoining with the sun and Venus, and all of these planets are going to be squaring Saturn and Neptune. And part of why earlier I said this energy is kind of like stop and start with like the brakes and the gas pedal. This is why, because you can see there's a lot of squares being made to Saturn and Neptune this month. And so the vibe of this is it's kind of like a bittersweet beginning. And so maybe you're like very hopeful and ready for a fresh start. Maybe it involves love or your passions or your values with Venus being there. But there could be like a heavy outlet dragging behind you with Saturn and Neptune. So it feels like you're kind of like planning a wedding while you're worried about the budget. So there's like a joy that's like real, or maybe there's a new start to like your ambitions or what you want to do or what your dreams are that is real, or your beliefs. But you have to do so responsibly, because there could be something, holding you back from really, full throttle sending this new start. And so because of this square, it really demands that you reconcile your dream with the cold hard facts where necessary. And so just an example, maybe you start a new relationship, for example, or a creative project, or you really, set your eyes on like a belief system that really resonates with you. But you immediately, you need to read the fine print. You need to make sure everything's lined up, or maybe you immediately have to discuss boundaries or timelines or limitations, because if you don't, you could be putting yourself in jeopardy. And this is like a real thing that will be sparked in your psyche at this time. But also, maybe, for example, you feel a surge of hope for the future, but it's kind of tempered by a realization that you have to give up your comfort zone to get there. And you're like, oh man, I want this thing, and now I actually have to do the hard work. Gosh dang it. Which, okay, look, a lot of us, we are willing to do hard work. I don't know how many people actually like it. There's probably some psychos who actually they love hard work 24/7. That's not most of us, but we're going to become more realistic about, what is required for our goals during this new moon. And so the warning is, do not let the reality check kill a dream. Don't do it. It's just refining that dream. It's not denying it. Take it as a refinement if you can. But the opportunity is to set a goal that is very smart. It's very specific or measurable or, relevant, whatever it may be, because the energy supports dreams that have a business plan, that are strategically laid out. And so if there's any advice I can give, it's whatever you're inspired to do, just plan it out. That's all you need to do. And then on the 20th, I want to mention this, Lilith will be entering Sagittarius. And so that, that raw, maybe a little bit taboo energy will be shifting dramatically. And it's crazy because with Lilith and Scorpio, a lot of people thought that, political scandals would come up. I feel like that's way more likely with Lilith entering Sagittarius, because Sagittarius kind of rules over politics. It rules over those beliefs, in my opinion. And so the vibe of this transit overall, it's kind of like that wild woman archetype, moving into the sign of the explorer. And so this energy refuses to be fenced in. So you may feel a collective intolerance for dogma or preaching or anybody trying to tell you or anybody how to live. And so when there are things that kind of restrict the collective's freedom or your freedom, they are not going to like it. And because Sagittarius is very expansive, they are more likely to, try to beat on that box and like break free from those limitations. Because Scorpio, it's more of like a seething energy. Sagittarius, it's more expansive. And so people will become more unapologetic and potentially vocal about their beliefs, but that's for better or for worse. That's like the warning. But on a personal level, maybe for example, you feel an urge to like leave groups or cancel plans that have judgmental people, or maybe you leave beliefs that are too judgmental, or maybe you post something controversial or opinionated online because you refuse to self-censor anymore. I think there's a lot less self-censoring going on, which, as I said, can be for better or for worse. But rebellion for the sake of rebellion can burn bridges. So if you are going to rebel on anything, my word of advice is to really do it strategically. Let yourself reclaim that truth, but don't lose the vision or the big picture of what it is you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to achieve peace, for example, but your mission is like the opposite of peace, really think about it before you phrase it. And this really could deal, with the collective. It could deal with more political issues, but it could just be very personal. And so don't feel the need to speak out on something bigger if it doesn't resonate with you, because you will know what you're meant to speak out on when that time comes. And then December 21st, Jupiter in Cancer in retrograde makes another square to Chiron in Aries, which did also happen a few months ago. And so the vibe of this is that it's kind of growing pains for the heart. And so Jupiter expands everything it touches, including our wounds. And so you could just feel a sting of insecurity regarding your independence or your leadership, but it's coming up so that it can be soothed by Jupiter's nurturing waters. And so maybe for an example, you receive a big compliment or an opportunity, but instead of feeling happy, you feel that imposter syndrome because of Chiron knocking on the door. Or maybe a family situation, for example, brings up an old childhood insecurity about not being strong enough or good enough. It could bring out insecurity just in general. That's what this transit could be. So the warning, don't retreat into your shell when things get vulnerable. The growth is staying present with the feeling and really letting yourself feel it and understand it so that you can heal it. But the opportunity is to be the parent to yourself that you needed when you were younger, or be the parent to yourself that you may not have now. Take what resonates with that, because self-soothing will lead to massive emotional growth on this day. And then also on the 21st, Capricorn season. It is the winter solstice. It is when the day becomes very short and the sun sets early. I'm just kidding. But it's also when the energy shifts from expansive to more essential. And so we are collectively focused more on status or reputation, or at the very least long-term security, and building what it takes to get there. That is what the collective is going to be feeling. We will really be nailing things down. It feels a little bit sober and ambitious and very quietly powerful. And so because the sun is in Capricorn, just remember that don't be too hard on yourself when it comes to your goals, and really take your time when it comes to executing these goals, because Capricorn does need to take its time. And so, for example, maybe you find yourself naturally reviewing your year and asking, what did I actually achieve, rather than did I have fun? Or maybe conversations shift from a holiday party to career planning and 5-year goals, and everything feels a little bit serious. And so the warning is to avoid measuring your self-worth solely by your productivity. Remember, for me, for example, I can work 1 hour and it's the equivalent of 6 hours of work from somebody else, but I only work a few hours out of the day. Don't measure yourself solely by the number of hours you work. Measure yourself, by the effort you're willing to put in. But also know that there's so much more to you than effort. There's like your heart, your intuition. Everybody has so many gifts. Just remember what your gifts are at this time, no matter what. But the opportunity is to really build something big, because even small steps taken now have the weight of authority behind them going into the new year. Because on the 24th, Venus will also be entering Capricorn. And so love will get serious. You'll get serious about your passions. You're not going to be interested in flings at this time. If you are single, you'll be interested in loyalty or reliability and someone who shows up on time. Same thing with your passions. It's not just going to be about, oh, I'll just see if this works out and I'll just have a little bit of fun with it. Although it is good to have fun, collectively, it'll be more like, okay, if this is fun, I'm going to work and nail it down and really master it, because collectively, people could value more acts of service at this time, or stability, or really, setting goals when it comes to our fun and our passions over the grand emotional displays that don't really hold the weight of the world and withstand the test of time. And Venus and Earth energy will ground our desires almost. It's like if we have these big dreams or hopes, not like dreams because that's Jupiter, but if we have these desires with Venus, we will try to put them in reality essentially. And so, for example, if you're an artist, for example, maybe you actually make that TikTok page, or maybe you actually, dedicate yourself to learning that new branch of art, or, maybe you've wanted to cut your hair or get a makeover and then you finally decide to actively do it. So the warning is that love can feel a bit transactional at this time if that's relevant. So make sure you aren't treating anybody you care about like a business merger. Make sure you're remembering that humanistic side of love. But the opportunity is to solidify a commitment, because it is a great time to discuss the future or a relationship and to make things very solid that you want to pursue. And then finally, we have Mercury in Sagittarius. Yes, I know it's making another square to Saturn in Pisces. Technically, it's making a square to Neptune too, but that's not going to go exact until next year. Just know that both energies kind of exist. And so the vibe of this is like the mental block. Maybe you have some big ideas, but you can't seem to articulate them, or they're met with skepticism. Or maybe it's like you're trying to think the logistics of something through, but it feels like you can't really nail all the details down. It's like you're trying to speak with a retainer in your mouth and, all the syllables aren't coming out properly. Or the same thing could be happening in your head. You just feel why am I not thinking as quickly or clearly as I normally do? And the square could also put a stop sign on communication. Maybe it demands that you prove your point, like with action, for example, before you're really allowed to pass. And so a good example, maybe you pitch a great idea to a boss or a partner and they really poke holes at it and they're nitpicky and you're like, why are you so nitpicky? You're normally not like this. This is a great idea. And it really demands you have more data and you're like, now I got to go back and get more data. So you feel like there's limitations on your ideas, or maybe you're trying to focus on writing, but your mind keeps drifting. I know a lot of people have ADHD. I actually have ADHD if you couldn't tell. And so it's maybe the ADHD acts up a little more, or maybe you start drifting into vague anxieties or fears about putting your voice out there. And so the warning, don't let negative feedback silence you at this time, because it's a good time to take it as a challenge to refine what it is that you're building. But the opportunity is to edit your work in whatever it is you're doing, edit your communications. This is kind of bad for brainstorming, but it's really good for proofreading and finding flaws in the plan so you can fix them. And so that is the overall forecast for December before we go into the new year. And so now you can go down to the timestamps, look for your placements, all of them. You can just do your rising sign if you want, but you can do all of them if you want. And let's see what the month holds in store for you. For you, Aries rising, this month is going to feel like a tale of two very different energies for you. And so you'll start the month with a lot of movement, maybe some scattered ideas, and a restless desire to be anywhere except where you currently are. You may be buzzing, but as we cross the halfway mark, the energy will shift dramatically into something much more serious and grounded. It could be career-oriented as well. And you are moving from the focus of your explorer side and more into the focus of your boss man or woman vibes. And so this is a month where you are being asked to take your big or wild visions and actually build the structure to support it. And so we kick things off on the 4th with the full moon in Gemini, which is going to be lighting up your third house of communication, your daily environment, your thought patterns. And so this is a massive clearing the air moment for you. And because this is happening in your third house, you could feel a sudden urgent need to articulate something that you've been holding back, or maybe you just finally get the missing piece of information regarding something major in your life, sort of like this aha moment. Within your body, though, this could feel like a nervous flutter in the chest, or maybe like a buzzing energy in your hands, and you could literally feel the need to write or to gesture or to fix things manually. And so the best way to use this energy is to finalize a decision that may have been stuck in limbo. However, you do need to be warned though, because this energy is very easy to slip into word vomit or overthinking loops. And so you are sharper than you realize. So try not to let your mind be too busy just to fill the silence, because this lets the important thoughts actually come to you at this time. But then following this on the 8th, your chart ruler of Mars will be continuing in your ninth house of beliefs and travel and expansion, but it will be making a square to Saturn in your 12th house. And so this creates a sensation of hurry up and wait kind of in your body. So you could have a burning desire to book a flight or start a new course, maybe expand your horizons in some way, or simply focus on a belief related venture, but you could hit a wall such as like a hidden fear or a subconscious block that really makes you second guess yourself. And you could feel this somatically as a restless energy in your legs or in your hips. It's like you want to run or you want to walk, but it could feel like that there are weights tied to you. And so the opportunity here is to really delay to check your blind spots before you take any leaps. Really take your time. And then by the 10th, when Mercury opposes Uranus across your 8th and 2nd houses, I would expect maybe the unexpected regarding your finances or resources or even your sense of self-worth. So you could get a sudden news about like a tax bill or an inheritance or a partner's income that shocks you into rearranging your budget, or you could simply just have a revelation that energetically sparks like this mental realization when it comes to your self-worth or your skills, as well as the deep psychological patterns surrounding these areas. And it's electric and disruptive, this energy, but it's also an opportunity to break static patterns regarding your resources. Going to the middle of the month, the vibe will shift completely on December 15th when your ruler of Mars will enter Capricorn in your 10th house of career and ambition. And so this is one of the best transits of the year for you, in my opinion. This is just an opinion because Mars is exalted here. And this means that your energy could go from a little bit scattered and exploratory to very strategic and focused. So you could metaphorically or literally feel your posture straighten up, literally feeling a sense of stiffness or strength as you start to take on more authority or responsibility. It's like you feel like the boss at this time. And this is the time to tackle the hardest project on your desk because you actually have the discipline to finish it. You could take the lead on a major work project or launch a business strategy with precision at this time. Just be careful though, not to become so goal-oriented that you turn cold towards the people supporting you or even cold towards yourself. Some people ignore themselves when they overwork. And then this leads us to the new moon in Sagittarius on the 19th, and this will fall in your 9th house. And so this is a beautiful moment to set intentions around travel, publishing, or maybe even higher education, whether that's literal with a university or just an independent study. We all learn differently. However, because this moon will be squaring Saturn, your optimism could really need a reality check at this time. So you could commit to a new certification or plan a long distance trip, but you'll immediately have to contend with like your budget or the timeline in some way. And so the key here is to just dream big, but really plan realistically. And then as we close out the year or the month, the sun will be entering Capricorn on the 21st, which is joining Mars in your 10th house of public image. So for the rest of the month, the spotlight will be firmly on your reputation and your ambitions. You could be very visible, and this is where you could receive public recognition, maybe an award, or simply you just focus a lot of attention to these areas of life. You could be focused on your career or your ambitions in some way, and so you'll likely feel a heavy but empowering weight on your shoulders, or like the weight of your impact in some way. But then around the same time, Jupiter in your 4th house will be squaring Chiron in your 1st house. And so this could manifest as a very tender moment where a family situation or a simple memory triggers an old insecurity about your independence or your identity. You could question if you are ready for the success that's coming your way. And so the opportunity here is to parent yourself through that trigger rather than lashing out. And then finally on the 24th, Venus will be entering Capricorn, joining the 10th house party. And so this adds a layer of charm or ease to that work focus we mentioned earlier. And so if there's a time to tap into the charm or the creativity regarding your goals, whether that's socially or through your values, it is now. And so it is a perfect energy to smooth over relations with a boss or to ask for a raise, as your value will be clearly visible. Or it could be a time to simply start on that creative, ambitious project you've been wanting to do. And so December is a month that really asks you to grow up. And so you begin with a lot of curiosity and noise, but you end the month standing tall in your authority. And the universe, in a way, is giving you a promotion, but it comes with the requirement that you show up and do the work. And so if you can channel that Mars energy into your career and ambitions rather than fighting the delays, you will enter the new year feeling like an absolute powerhouse. Taurus risings, this month for you is a journey from the material or the tangible world to a more spiritual and unseen one. And so you do begin the month heavily focused on your resources, maybe your money, your debts, your values, maybe your energetic exchanges with others, or the depths or your self-worth. It could be psychological or material, and it could feel a little bit intense or transactional at first. However, as the month progresses and the planets shift into a fellow Earth sign of Capricorn, the energy could lighten significantly for you, so you could move from survival mode into expansion mode and could find stability through pursuits that really help you to expand your horizons. And so the month will be opening up with the spotlight kind of being shined on your finances or maybe your sense of self-worth, because there is a full moon in Gemini on the 4th, which will be lighting up your second house of personal income, possessions, your values, your self-worth. And this is kind of a cash out moment of sorts. So you could finally receive a payment you've been waiting for. Maybe you decide to make a significant purchase that you've been debating, or you could just have a mental realization regarding something related to your values, skills, and self-worth. Somatically, though, this full moon, it could show up as like maybe a tension in your throat or your neck, which are your ruling body parts. This does rule Taurus, as you do grapple with speaking up about your self-worth. And so the opportunity here with this transit is maybe to settle a debt, or at the very least, clarify exactly what you own versus what you owe. I just came up with that now. I'm very proud of it. But the warning for this transit is to avoid impulsive spending just to soothe an emotional itch. I know you want to buy that Uber Eats, maybe avoid the retail therapy just for a little bit. And this could feel good now if you do this, but it could stress you out later. Really make purchases that are towards what you value. And tension could spike though around the 10th though, when Mercury in your 7th house of relationships will make an opposition to Uranus in your 1st house of self. And so this is almost like this classic me versus them dynamic. So maybe a partner, whether romantic or business, could say something shocking, rebellious, or unexpectedly blunt that really rattles your sense of like safety or stability with them. Or you could just have a simple urge to rebel against relational dynamics and the idea of how you relate in order to have a healthier relationship with yourself and therefore a healthier relationship with others. Take what resonates. And so in the body, this transit, it could feel like this electric buzz in your nervous system. You could feel like a very fight or flight response triggered by somebody else's unpredictability. Really listen to your nervous system. And the best way to handle this is to just stay grounded. Let the shockwave pass before you react to any situation. Just sit there and observe your nervous system, because it is an opportunity to break a stagnant relational pattern, even if it feels uncomfortable. And then the vibe will shift drastically though on the 15th when Mars enters Capricorn, moving into your 9th house of travel, beliefs, and higher wisdom. And so for the past few weeks, Mars has been in your 8th house, which could have stirred up anxiety, or it could have sparked a need for crisis management of sorts. But now Mars enters a fellow Earth sign and you could feel a massive release of pressure. So you gain the drive to explore. And so you could suddenly have the energy to plan a major trip, maybe pursue higher learning, or maybe fight for a cause that you believe in. And so the energy will move from like a defensive position to more of an offensive position. And so you could feel very capable, worldly, and ready to conquer new territory. This is a great energy for you. However, you will have one last piece of business to settle in the deep end of your chart, because the new moon in Sagittarius on the 19th will fall in your 8th house of shared resources, intimacy, psychological depths, life and death, etc. And so this is a restart button for your entanglements. You could sign a new loan agreement, you could merge finances with a partner, or simply just decide to tackle a psychological block through therapy or even ritualistic healing. And because this moon is making a square to Saturn, the beginning of this could feel very heavy and intimidating in whatever pursuit you take on. And so the opportunity here really is to create a long-term plan for financial and mental freedom. Think about both, even if it requires strict discipline in the now. However, the year ends on a high note for you because on the 21st, the sun will also be entering Capricorn, your ninth house, bringing a focus to the sector of philosophy, long-term vision, and expansion in your chart. And at this time, you could be stepping out of the shadows and really looking at the horizon. You could find yourself less concerned with the daily grinding and more focused on the big picture of your life. You could be feeling very inspired. And so physically, maybe you feel a desire to be outdoors, maybe to hike, to stretch your legs, literally and metaphorically, or you may just feel a release of tough energy that you've been holding on to. It's like, you can finally breathe. Simultaneous, though, with Jupiter in your third house making a square to Chiron in your 12th house, this is a very subtle but potent aspect for you this month, so you could have a conversation with someone that inadvertently triggers a deep subconscious wound regarding your intelligence or your right to speak, or you could simply just worry that you say the wrong things due to some surface issues that may mentally pop up, maybe from your past. And so the key is to realize that this sensitivity is actually helping you heal a fear of being heard. And then finally, at the end of the month, your chart ruler of Venus will be also joining the Capricorn party on the 24th. And so this is a lovely energy for you because you could attract things that are exotic, maybe foreign or expansive, or just simply educational. This will be different depending on your chart. And so maybe you could fall in love with a philosophy, a culture, a higher pursuit, or even a person who acts as a teaching force in your life. And love and passion feels like an adventure, but a very grounded one for you. And so you aren't just dreaming of a future at this time, you are actively planning the itinerary, which is super nice after some heaviness. And so December really asks you to audit your life. And you start by looking at your resources, your entanglements, ensuring that the exchange of energy is fair. But once that housekeeping is done, the universe invites you to pack your bags, either literally or mentally. And then the heavy earth energy at the end of the month will support you in building a philosophy of life that is sturdy enough to support your ambitions for 2026. Gemini risings, this is arguably one of the most important months for you in the year because it begins with the spotlight kind of shining directly on your face. You are stepping into a period of high visibility or high energy, or at the very least, a high amount of self-focus. However, the narrative of the month will shift from more of like a me perspective to a we perspective, and then to a how all of these elements tied together perspective, if that makes sense. And so you start the month by defining who you are and what you're about. But then at the end of the month, you're navigating like the complex, serious waters of maybe shared resources, intimacy, long-term commitment, or deep psychological inner workings. And so it is a month of essentially growing up in terms of how you relate to others by first developing a very strong sense of self. And so the month will kick off with your personal headline event of the month because the full moon in Gemini on December 4th will be lighting up your first house of self and identity. And so this is kind of like your annual reset button of sorts. And so you could feel a sudden urge to change your appearance, maybe launch a personal brand, or simply just stand up and say, this is who I am now. Hello, world. And so somatically, this could feel like a surplus of nervous energy. Maybe you feel a little bit buzzy, unable to sit still. Maybe you're mentally busy, as this is Gemini, which is a very mentally busy sign. Or it could feel like your skin is extra sensitive to the environment just because you feel things very potently when the moon is in your sign. And so the opportunity here really is to shed an old skin or a label that people have put on you that you don't want to keep anymore. However, the warning is that you could become a bit self-absorbed or maybe scatterbrained. So make sure you aren't talking at people at this time, but rather to them. And it's not like you would do this on purpose, but the energy can feel a little bit intense and you can go on autopilot when that happens. And then a few days later, on the 10th, your chart ruler of Mercury will be sitting in your 6th house of work, health, routine, and this will be making an opposition to Uranus in your 12th house. And so this could feel a little bit disruptive or a little bit electric. And so you could experience a sudden change in your work schedule. Maybe your health flares up, and that really forces you to pay attention to your body. Not anything serious, but like maybe the lack of sleep, for example, could be catching up to you. That's just one example. Or maybe there's a subconscious secret coming to light that disrupts your daily flow. And because this involves your ruling planet of Mercury, you could feel this very intensely in your nervous system. And so pay attention to that. Or you could feel a sudden spike of anxiety or insomnia, or you could just have some weird ass dreams. I have weird ass dreams anytime something in my 12th house is involved. And so the best way to handle this is to view the disruption almost as this like liberation. Maybe that canceled meeting or a broken routine is exactly the freedom or the break of like monotony that you needed to rethink how you spend your days. And so take every setback as an opportunity. That is really the best way to handle this energy. The vibe, though, will shift on the 15th, though, when Mars enters Capricorn, and this moves into your 8th house of shared resources, intensity, intimacy, deep psychological inner workings. And so for the past few weeks, Mars has been in your relationship sector. It's been in your 7th house, which could have caused some friction or heated debates with partners at its worst. But at its best, it could have given you a drive to act towards, with, or on behalf of others. Take what resonates with that. And so now the energy goes a little bit deeper. You aren't at the surface of relational action anymore. You are penetrating it. You are going deep. You are getting strategic, and you are tackling the dirty laundry of your life, whether that's within relationships or within your own psychological depths. You could feel a drive to cut off financial leaks, for example. Maybe that credit card spending can be cut, or maybe you want to ruthlessly pay down debt. But you could just also feel a strong drive to get down to the root of important, deep matters in your life. And so physically, this could manifest as a surge of libido. This is only for some people, or maybe a desire for intense physical release could be through exercise as well. Take what resonates. And so Mars here is very surgical. It helps you cut out what has been draining your power if you use this transit correctly. And then on the 19th, we will have the new moon in Sagittarius, which is activating that 7th house of relationships once more. So we're revisiting this area of your life. And so this really is a fresh start in terms of how you relate to others. For some, you could just meet someone new who feels like a teacher or an adventurer, or maybe you could renew vows with a current partner. And this could be like not very literal. It could be, like a metaphorical renewal of a relationship, or you could simply just find new ways to relate and place value on others, regardless of your relationship status. However, though, because the moon will be making a square to Saturn, this isn't a fluffy new beginning. It comes with conditions. So you could decide to commit to a new level, but maybe you realize that the logistical burden is very heavy, or maybe you could start a business partnership that requires a scary amount of paperwork, or you could find it hard to connect with others due to your schedule. And so the opportunity here is to pursue relations in a healthy and optimal way, even if the initial commitment feels a little bit weighty. And then as we head into holiday season, the sun will be entering Capricorn on the 21st, which really illuminates that 8th house sector of your chart once again. And so you could be less interested in small talk at this time and more interested in getting down to the real stuff, the nitty gritty. And so you could find yourself having conversations about wills, maybe taxes, inheritances. That will only apply to some people, but it could also be deep emotional secrets, maybe the intense psychology of your life. And so it is a time of transformation where you are asked to merge your energy with others, but do so responsibly. And then around the 24th, Venus will also be joining Capricorn in your 8th house. And so this could be a very lucky transit for money coming from other people or outside sources, or maybe you have an intense psychological breakthrough that finally changes the tides of any long-standing issues that have been burdening you. And so maybe you receive a bonus, maybe a generous gift, or maybe a partner's income increases that benefits you. But you could also take it to a new level when it comes to intimacy, but you could also just simply find creative inspiration within the depths of your psyche, because I do find that Venus transits really spark creativity sometimes. But then finally, you need to watch out for December 29th when your ruler of Mercury, which is now in your 7th house, makes a square to Saturn, which is in your 10th house. And so you could try to have an optimistic conversation with a partner or a boss or a co-worker, whoever is relevant. And this could be met with a no or a harsh reality check from an authority figure or somebody you look up to. And so don't let the rejection at this time dishearten you. If this does happen, it's just a sign that your plan needs more structure before it can be approved. But this could also put up some communication burdens when it comes to career pursuits, disputes. This is another way this can play out. It doesn't have to be an actual conversation. It could just put up burdens with your connections in some way. And so the trick is to take every goal you have one step at a time, because this storm shall too pass. And so December is a month that pulls you out of your head and into your commitments very deeply. And so you start with a burst of personal freedom and self-expression, but the universe will quickly guide you towards collaboration. And then by the end of the month, you are learning that true power comes not just from being clever, but comes from knowing how to merge your resources and talents with others and outside forces effectively. It's intense, but it is a really empowering month for you in terms of your financial and emotional security. Cancer risings, because you are ruled by the moon, you're likely very sensitive to moon transits in general. That means full moons, new moons, etc. But this month is going to be offering a very specific glow up opportunity for you. And so you are still hosting the planet of luck and expansion, Jupiter, right in your own sign, which means you are still expanding rapidly. Even if it's in retrograde, it's just more internal. And the month begins with the need for deep rest and spiritual recalibration, almost like a hibernation period. However, as we cross the halfway mark, the lights kind of turn on in your house of relationships. And so you go from being either a hermit or someone very focused on your daily routines to being a little bit more relational, dealing with potentially active, serious, and committed energy within your relationships, your love life, your business connections, platonic friendships, or at the very least, you're really taking action to improve how you relate to others. And so expect a shift in how you expend your energy as we move through December. And so, as I said, you are ruled by the moon. And so the full moon in Gemini on the 4th is potentially going to feel very potent for you. And it's going to fall in your 12th house of the subconscious, spirituality, maybe solitude, but also transcendence and the unseen. And so this is kind of like a massive release valve in your life and your emotions. And so you could feel a sudden wave of exhaustion or like a desire to withdraw from the world and to process your emotions on a very mental level, because it is Gemini. It's kind of like a mental detox of sorts. Maybe you could have vivid dreams that help you process a secret or a fear that you've been carrying. And 12th house transits can be very potent with how you dream at night. So just keep that in mind if you have a little bit of like weird dreams at the beginning of the month. Somatically though, this energy could feel like a heaviness in the eyelids or a fog in your brain. And so this is because your body is literally demanding that you slow down and integrate the data of the Gemini full moon. And so the opportunity here is really to close a chapter on a self-sabotaging habit, or maybe to finally get closure on a past situation without really needing to speak to the person involved, because the 12th house is the unseen. It is very mentally busy though, so your subconscious could kind of be chatty at this time. However, though, the sweetest aspect of the month for you will arrive around the 10th, when Neptune in your 9th house will go direct. And at the very same time, this will be trining with Jupiter retrograde in your 1st house. And this is pure magic, in my opinion, because your intuition will be hitting the play button and flowing effortlessly into your sense of self. And so you could have a spiritual breakthrough, maybe a moment of deep faith, or you could just simply feel incredibly lucky and held by the universe at this time. You could also look very magnetic to others right now, because you are radiating almost like this gentle, compassionate confidence. Simultaneously, though, on the 10th, Mercury will be in your 5th house of creativity, and it will be making an opposition to Uranus in your 11th house of community and groups. And so this could bring a shock to your social life in some way, or a shock to your dreams or your creative expressions. Maybe a friend, for example, could say something surprising, or you could unexpectedly walk away from a cause because it really restricts your creative freedom in some way. Alternatively, though, for some people, maybe a romantic fling could suddenly turn into a friendship, or vice versa. You could be unfriend zoned, and it's almost this unpredictable energy, and it could play out a few ways. So stay flexible. Just know it'll deal with your creativity and your joy, but also how you connect to society in some way. The energy will shift very sharply, though, on the 15th, because Mars will be entering Capricorn and moving into your 7th house of one-on-one relationships. And this, in my opinion, is one of the most critical critical transits of the month for you because Mars is very driven. It can be aggressive for some people, and now it is sitting in the sector of other people in your chart. But what I will say is it is exalted in Capricorn, which does help. And so this could mean that a partner, whether romantic or business, could be very busy, ambitious, or perhaps a little bit bossy. And if you are single, you could start attracting people into your life who are go-getters, someone who is commanding or direct, or you could just be simply moving into a direction that's a bit more active in how you pursue relational matters. Maybe you're a little bit more extroverted than usual, even if you're not usually extroverted. And so the warning here is that conflict can rise easily because Mars can make interactions feel a little bit like a battlefield for some people, but this will depend on the nature of your natal Mars. And so the best way to handle this is to collaborate on a goal with another person, if at all possible, or to really pursue relationships, even if it's platonic. And so if you and another person, for example, are fighting for something together or you're working together, you won't really be against each other, which is the worst manifestation of this transit. And then on the 19th, we will be having the new moon in Sagittarius, and this will be activating your 6th house of health and routine. And so at this time, you will be really ready to turn over a new leaf regarding your daily habits. And so, for example, maybe you start a diet, a new workout routine, or maybe you just simply reorganize your office or your life. In my case, when I had for this transit, I did end up spotting a long-term health issue and I worked to resolve it. And so take what resonates. And so because the moon squares Saturn though, during this transit for you, this new leaf could take a little bit of active effort to turn. And so you could feel a little bit overwhelmed by the sheer volume of work on your plate in some ways. But the key for this transit for you, just start small. Don't overhaul your whole life in one day. Just fix one part of your routine at a time where relevant and build on that slowly and methodically. And then as the year closes, the sun will be entering Capricorn on the 21st, and this illuminates your 7th house of relationships even further. And so this could mean cuffing season for some people, but this could also mean it's simply a time where you just connect with people more and your identity is really drawn towards that. And your focus moves a bit away from yourself and onto other people. Maybe you gain some clarity on who is standing beside you in your life. If your relationship, for example, this is for some people, if it isn't working, maybe the sun here will show you exactly why. But if you have relationships that are working, you'll feel a strong urge to make it official or public or to really, lean into that if it's platonic. And at the very least, you will better understand how to relate at this time, even if this isn't like a super busy time for you. Around the same time, though, Jupiter in your 1st house will be making a square to Chiron in your 10th house of career. And so this is kind of like a growing pain aspect, in my opinion, because you are expanding personally with this transit, but this growth could trigger an insecurity about your professional reputation or your ambitions. Maybe you worry that being your authentic self, you're perceived as like weak or unprofessional, or you're not good enough, or you could simply just feel inadequate in how you are pursuing achievement. Maybe you don't feel worthy of the things that you want to achieve. And so the opportunity here is to realize your vulnerability is actually your leadership superpower. It's actually the thing that will carry you through. You don't need to hide your heart to be successful. And then finally, Venus will be joining the Capricorn party on the 24th, which brings this soothing balm to your 7th house, which is great because if Mars brought conflict earlier in the month, which will be for some people, Venus will bring the peace and commitment. You value reliability right now, and so issues with how you relate will begin to resolve if you commit to seriousness, or you could just simply feel inspired by others because, I think that Venus brings inspiration, so take what resonates. And so December really is a month for you that starts with you in a cocoon and ends with you holding hands with others, but in ways that actually make you feel safe. And you are doing important internal work in the first half of the month, really clearing out that mental clutter and trusting your intuition. But by the end of the month, the universe will be pushing you out the door and asking you to collaborate. And so the theme is shared ambition, whether in love or business, because reforming connection to align with people who match your drive is the key to unlocking your potential for the new year. Leo risings. I'm a Leo rising too, and we are ruled by the sun. So you will naturally feel sun-related transits pretty potently. And this month is a distinct story of two halves because you begin the month in your element because you are fiery, expressive, maybe seeking joy because the sun will be in Sagittarius, which does light up our 5th house of fun, romance, creativity. and you are basically the life of the party at this time, even if it's a party of one, or at the very least deeply connected to your inner child. But as the month progresses, the energy sobers up a little bit because you move from the stage to the studio and you shift your focus from performance to the hard work, daily routines, and mastery of your craft required to keep your Leo-like light burning bright as the sun moves into Capricorn. And so opening up the month will open up with a very high energy transit because the full moon is in Gemini on the 4th, lighting up your 11th house of community, dreams, vision, etc. And this isn't just about friends. This is about your networks, your hopes, and the collective consciousness you are tapped into. And so you could complete a big collaborative project, or maybe a situation within your social sphere reaches a boiling point where the group dynamic shifts entirely. Or maybe you simply just have a realization about your goals and dreams within society that is downloaded on a very mental level, as Gemini is very mental. Somatically, though, this energy could feel like a buzz in your calves, maybe your ankles or your nervous system, because you really feel like the urge to move. And so you could feel an urge to move to like a vision or a cause or a group that really resonates on a mental level, as that is what defines the 11th house for you. And so the opportunity here is to really align your future vision with causes or people who do align with you mentally, but the warning is really to avoid getting swept up in groupthink or drama that doesn't actually align with your individual path. However, you do need to watch out for December 10th as well, because Mercury in your 4th house of home will be making another opposition to Uranus in the 10th house of your career. It will be in Taurus. And so this kind of could affect the very foundation of your chart or your life versus how you put yourself out there, your public reputation, your career. And so you could receive sudden news at work, maybe like a policy change or a shock to your status that really immediately disrupts your internal sense of security, or conversely, maybe a household emergency or a need within your home or your innermost self could force you to put your professional ambitions to the side just for a little bit. And it can feel like being pulled in two different directions. And the key for this time really is to stay flexible, because the tower moment that you experience at this time is really trying to break you out of the rut where you've begun to sacrifice your private peace for your public ambitions, or vice versa. And so this really is about having a work-home life balance in whatever way that resonates with you. And then the energy shifts dramatically on the 15th because Mars will be entering Capricorn, activating your 6th house. And it is important to note Mars is exalted here. So this isn't just about doing chores and being boring. This is about competence in your daily work. You could feel a sudden surge in your drive to be useful, skillful, and physically efficient in whatever you pursue. Maybe you're working longer hours, you're tackling a fitness challenge, or simply refining your daily methodology and the structure of your daily life. Within your body, Mars in the 6th house can manifest as inflammation, maybe fevers or gut issues for some people if you're not careful or in balance, which is a sign that the engine is running hot. And as a Leo rising with Neptune in my 6th house, I relate to this. And so if you are running on high fuel at this time, use this fuel to master your routine, but try not to drive yourself into the ground and burn out. And then on the 19th, we'll be having the new moon in Sagittarius, which offers such a beautiful reset in your 5th house. And this is about your creative life force and your ability to take risks. And so you are planting seeds of joy, potentially a lot of seeds at this time. However, because the moon will be squaring Saturn in the 8th house of deep entanglements, this new beginning could feel a little bit serious in some way. So you could start dating someone, for example, but immediately have to navigate deep conversations about fear or intimacy. This could also apply to current relationships, or you could launch a creative business, but then realize the energetic debt or cost required is higher than you thought. And so the opportunity really is to commit to your joy, but also take your happiness seriously. And then your chart ruler, the sun, will be entering Capricorn on the 21st and joining Mars in your 6th house. And so for the rest of the month, your sense of vitality comes from being of service. You aren't seeking applause right now. You're seeking the satisfaction of a job well done. And so you could find yourself decluttering your life, editing your habits, maybe refining your diet. And you shine at this time by being the person who has their life together, or at the very least, you're trying to get your life together. And then around this time, Jupiter in the 12th will be squaring with Chiron in the 9th. 9th. And this isn't the first time this year we felt this aspect. And I know this will be a deeply felt internal aspect, given that Cancer is hosting Jupiter that's in retrograde. And so maybe a subconscious belief or a spiritual insight could clash with a philosophy that you used to hold. Maybe you feel a crisis of faith, but this is actually expanding your intuition. And so you are healing the part of you that thought you had to have all of the answers to be safe. You don't have to have them, and that's okay. And then finally, Venus will be joining the Capricorn party on the 24th, which brings a spoonful of sugar to that busy 6th house, which thank God, because if Mars is making the grind stressful, Venus will thankfully make it pleasant. And so you could find a newfound love for the ritual of your days. Maybe you enjoy a morning coffee more. Maybe you go for a walk, or even the camaraderie that you have with your work colleagues could be enhanced. And so this is also excellent energy for healing the body. Maybe beauty treatments or wellness routines that you start now could have lasting effects. And so December really asks you to find the balance between the stage and the backstage. You could be starting the month by soaking up the love from your community and expressing your heart's desire, but by the end of the month, the universe reminds you that even the best performers need a solid routine to sustain them. And if you can handle the sudden work-life shocks mid-month with grace, you could end the year feeling healthier, more organized, and physically stronger than you have in a long time going into the new year. Virgo risings, because you are ruled by Mercury, you're always kind of hypersensitive to communication and movement with Mercury transits in general, especially retrogrades, which we were dealing with in November. And so this month is quite a ride for your nervous system. And so you could start the month very visible or highly busy with your career and public reputation taking center stage. It feels like everyone is looking at you, or at the very least, you're looking at you. Or at the very least, you could be looking at your ambitions and what you want to achieve in the world. However, as the month progresses, the energy will retreat significantly into your private sphere. And so you shift from the metaphorical board or the metaphorical office to sort of like your living room, your home space, and you're dealing with your roots and home dynamics at this time before finally ending the month in a space of creative play and grounded romance. And so this is kind of like a whirlwind of a month for you, but it has the possibility to end so great. And so the month does open with a career-defining moment during the full moon in Gemini on the 4th, which will illuminate your 10th house. And so this isn't just about your job. This is about your ambition and how you are perceived by the public eye. Remember, 6th house is work, 10th house is what you're known for. And so you could wrap up a major professional project, maybe receive a promotion, or decide to leave a path that no longer stimulates you intellectually. And as a Leo rising myself, last month I had the full moon in my 10th house. And in addition to getting a recognition that I didn't expect, I received a lot of emotional insight about how to tackle my goals. And so that could be a theme that you see this month as well. And because Gemini is a dual sign, you could find yourself juggling 2 different titles or roles at once. This only applies to some people. Somatically, though, this can feel like a buzz in your chest or your throat, maybe a pressure to perform and articulate your authority in some way. And so the opportunity here is to really be seen for your intelligence. Speak up if you feel the need to speak up during this full moon, because the microphone is on, but the warning is to ensure you aren't promising more than you can deliver, just to look good and hold yourself accountable. However, the most volatile day for you is likely on the 10th, when your chart ruler of Mercury, which is in your 3rd house, will make an opposition to Uranus in your 9th house. This is kind of like mental lightning, and because it involves your ruling planet, you could feel this transit very physically. Maybe you have anxiety, racing thoughts, or a sudden need to change your surroundings. You could receive shocking news that almost zaps your brain, or you could experience a sudden disruption to expansive opportunities in some way, or even just receive jarring realizations about the ideas or beliefs that you hold dear. I know this is very vague, but this will be very different depending on your personal chart. And so you could have a shift in perspectives in some ways, suddenly realizing a belief system or philosophy you held is no longer valid, whatever that means for you. And so the key is to ride the wave of innovation rather than trying to control the chaos. And then on the 15th, you do get some relief as an Earth rising, which could feel nice and encouraging because Mars will be entering Capricorn, moving into your 5th house. And remember, Mars is exalted here, and the 5th house is all about self-expression and that childlike joy. And so this gives you a driven, almost strategic approach to fun. Maybe you suddenly get back into a sport or a hobby, or you feel a surge in libido and passion, and you are done fighting with that deep internal energy with Mars in the 4th, and you are really ready to express yourself. And this energy really is ambitious creativity being in Capricorn, and so you want to create things that last. However, the focus will return one last time to your 4th house with the new moon in Sagittarius. And so this is a new beginning for your private life, or the turning of a new leaf. Maybe you decide to move or to renovate or to set a new boundary with someone you live with, or to set an emotional boundary with yourself when it comes to your healing pursuits and your inner child. But because this moon will be making a square to Saturn in your 7th house of relationships, this fresh start could come with a little bit of interpersonal friction. And so you could disagree with a partner when it comes to a logistical issue with the new start, or maybe you could want to secure your peace at home, but a contract or an open enemy or a coworker, whatever it may be, could restrict you. And so the opportunity here is to really build a home that actually supports you, but you will have to negotiate with how you relate to others to do this, or what significance you put on others to do this. And then as we head into the holiday season, the sun will be entering Capricorn on the 21st, joining that 5th house party that we've been talking about. And so this is such great energy for you that could really make you feel mentally more light. And so it puts some light on the part of your chart that rules over your inner child and what makes you feel special. So you could find yourself taking a hobby very seriously, or turning a craft into a business, or focusing intensely on your children if you have them. Won't apply to everybody, obviously. But then simultaneously with Venus joining that party, which is a surprise, there is a stellium in Capricorn right now. This is one of the best transits for romance and creativity, and this will be happening on the 24th. So if you're in a relationship, you could take romance to a new level in a way that lasts. But if you're single, this could just be a good time to find somebody who's committing. But if the 5th house simply relates to creativity in your case, it could just be a good time to commit to tackling that project that you have in a way that holds up to the weight of life. However, I would keep an eye on December 29th when your ruler of Mercury, which is now in your 4th house, makes a square to Saturn in your 7th house. And so this transit could involve someone in your life, either a boss, coworker, friend, or lover, really making it hard to relax at home. This is similar to the earlier themes of the month, maybe due to some conflict of ideas. And so you are being asked to think through your perspectives before vocalizing them, and standing your ground whenever a moment of a confident idea comes to you. And calm communication is key to getting your point across. But also this transit could just relate to maybe, there's somebody who's like stressing you out in another setting, and you have anxiety about it and you overthink it. And so really try to keep your peace at this time. And so this month brings you home. You start by conquering the world in your public realm, but the universe will quickly guide you back to your foundation, and you are resolving the noise in your private life so that you can actually enjoy yourself and find joy in life. And then by the time the month ends, you move past the domestic stress and you are entering a period of grounded creativity and love. And so it's about building a life that feels as good as it looks on a resume. And this is a great ending to start the new year off with. Libra risings, because you guys are ruled by the planet Venus, your environment really does dictate your mood very strongly. And so this month will bring a distinct shift in your surroundings. And so you are going to begin the month in a state of high velocity of movement. Maybe there's a lot of emails or messages or short trips or errands or maybe even conversations. It feels very buzzy, very social, and perhaps a little bit scattered. However, the second half of the month will bring a very hard pivot more inward. And so the energy moves from the communicative side of life to the more internalized side of life. And you are being asked to take all of that information you've gathered and to really bring it home, focusing on either your family, maybe your private sanctuary, and your emotional foundations. And so the month will open up with a broader perspective during the full moon in Gemini on the 4th, which will be lighting up your 9th house of expansion and higher learning. And so this isn't just about travel. It's it's about your entire worldview and your true search for meaning. And so you could be finishing up a degree, maybe you're returning from a significant trip, or maybe you're finally publishing a message that you've been working on, or maybe you're really just expanding your horizons in some way. So take what resonates. Somatically and within your body, you could feel like a very restless energy in your legs at this time, maybe like a literal desire to roam or expand, whether it's through study or the act of exploration itself. And this will be on a very mental level because it is in the sign of Gemini. And so the opportunity for this full moon is to really let go of a dogma or a belief system that has been keeping your world very small. It's time to really grow that. The warning for this full moon, however, just avoid getting into intellectual debates and playing the devil's advocate just for the sake of it, because you could win an argument but lose a connection at this time. And then around the 10th, Mercury will be in your second house of income, and it'll be making another opposition to Uranus in your 8th house of shared resources and psychology. This did happen in November. It's happening again because of the end of the Mercury retrograde. And so this really could be like a resource shockwave around what is mine versus what is ours, versus what value do I bring versus what do others bring me. So maybe you receive like an unexpected bill, or maybe even conversely, maybe a windfall that disrupts your budget. But deeper than that, this is kind of about your internal values versus your external entanglements. And so maybe a partner could make a unilateral decision that rattles your sense of security, or maybe you could just make a revelation about your resources and worth that affects how you give your energy away. That is a very simplistic way, but that could be what happens. It doesn't have to be this big event. And so physically, this can manifest as a tension in maybe your throat or your neck, which is associated with the second house. And you could feel very choked up about speaking your truth. This will only apply to some people, and this is because you could have, issues where you do have to reclaim your worth during this transit. And so the best way to handle this is to be innovative. Use the disruption to think about how you handle your assets and your attachments. And then the vibe will change drastically on the 15th because Mars will be entering Capricorn and moving into your 4th house of home, family, and roots. And this is a very loud transit for you. It's in an angular house, but also remember, Mars is exalted here, and so it could bring a massive drive to improve your foundations in some way. And for some, this could manifest as a sudden motivation to renovate, maybe to build or to declutter aggressively. And it's also worth noting that Mars is a planet of severance, so this could indicate friction with family members, roommates, or the past itself. Because remember, Mars is sometimes done by you, like you're doing the action, but it can also be done onto you. That's not to scare you, that's just the nature of Mars. And so you could feel like your home is a construction zone in some way, either literally or emotionally. And the key is to direct this energy into a project, because if you are tearing down a wall or building an open concept kitchen or renovating your home or renovating your roots, even if it's internal, for example, and even if this change isn't very dramatic, then it won't be done onto you. And that's kind of the best way that this transit can play out. And then on the 19th, we have the new moon in Sagittarius activating your 3rd house of communication and local community. And so at this time, you are ready to turn a page in how you speak or interact with your immediate environment. Maybe there's a new start with your thought patterns. Some of you, this will only apply to some of you. Maybe you buy a car or you start a writing project or you commit to learning a new skill. But because the moon is squaring Saturn in your 6th house of health or routine and your day-to-day life, you could feel blocked by your daily routines in some way, which requires a little bit of caution. And so maybe you want to spend time doing your 3rd house pursuits, for example, but your day job is demanding all of your time or burning you out. And so the opportunity here is to create a disciplined schedule that carves out small pockets of time for your ideas. That's very important. That's the only way to let the two coexist. And then as the year closes, the sun will be entering Capricorn on the 21st, illuminating that 4th house of home even further. And so the spotlight is now firmly on your roots, not just kind of on your roots when Mars entered there. And so you are likely going to be a little bit less mentally busy at this time, unless you have some very extremely mentally busy placements in your chart, and you're going to be more interested in either hosting or grounding or really digging deep into your roots at this time. You could find yourself playing the role of the anchor for your family, for example. Maybe you provide structure for others. But you could also just be providing more structure for yourself. But then also it is worth noting that on the 24th, Venus, which is your chart ruler, will be joining that Capricorn party. This is kind of gonna soothe things over. Maybe if Mars stirred things up or you felt a little bit tense in your home pursuits, Venus is gonna be here to beautify things. Maybe you wanna beautify your sanctuary, or maybe you draw inspiration from your roots or your home, as Venus can relate to creativity sometimes. And so you could find yourself buying nice furniture, maybe decorating for the holidays with extra care, or simply enjoying a peaceful, loving vibe with those you care about, or even just yourself, or tackling creative pursuits that tie in sometime to your roots. And so if Mars brought some conflict or some tension earlier in the month, Venus will bring out the olive branch, and so you're likely to feel safe, secure, and loved within the four walls that you have. However, you do have to watch out for December 29th, though, because Mercury in your third house will be making another square to Saturn in your sixth. And so you could try to have an important conversation with someone or try to develop an idea yourself, but you really hit a wall. Maybe you feel criticized for your ideas or ignored, or maybe you just feel very scattered in general. And this could relate to the burnout that I talked about earlier. And so don't push your agenda if people aren't listening. Stop talking and wait for the energy to clear. But also this transit could relate to maybe you just feel like very mentally scattered, maybe you feel very mentally busy, and there's something about your routine that is not allowing your mind to calm down. And so you are being asked to really, facilitate your day-to-day life in such a way that really supports your body, and really listen to your body cues so that you can take the best care of yourself. And so in conclusion, December asks you to really, master your environment. You start the month by dealing with the noise of the outside world, maybe surprises with your resources or your self-worth, maybe busy communications, but you end the month by retreating into your shell and building it strong, because the universe is asking you to build a home base that is strong enough to hold you. And by the time the new year rings in, you are going to be recharged, and you're going to feel better, and you're going to be able to go into that new year ready to conquer the world. Scorpio risings this month for you is very, very intimately tied to the condition of your ruling planet of Mars, or at the very least your traditional ruler. And so as the month begins, Mars will still be moving through your sector of money, values, your possessions, your second house, which can mean tangible assets, but also intangible, which may make you very protective over what is yours, and perhaps a little bit defensive regarding your energy in general. But the headline news for the month is the shift for Mars entering Capricorn, because this is an exalted placement for your traditional chart ruler, which really means that you're getting a massive upgrade in your energy levels at this time. And so you could go from feeling defensive about your resources or your self-worth to feeling very sharp or strategic or articulate. This is a great change for you, because Capricorn also sextiles your rising. And so the theme of the month is kind of mastering the message. And so this month you are really finding your voice, and by the end of the month, you are going to be using it to hopefully build something permanent, because Capricorn likes to build. And so let's get into it. So the month really opens up with an intense psychological wave during the full moon in Gemini on the 4th, which will be lighting up your 8th house of shared resources, transformation, the deep parts of life. And this is really your natural domain, the house of fear, maybe debt or energetic exchange, because the 8th house and Scorpio are very similar in nature. And so you may handle this energy better than most, but it could still feel a little bit heavy. And so you could pay off a debt, or maybe you resolve a complex tax issue, or maybe you just sever an energetic cord with a past lover or a trauma that you've been holding on to. Take what resonates. For some, it's more internal, and for others, it's external. And so the opportunity here is to really free yourself from a dependency that you have. Don't know what that dependency is. It'll really depend. So pay attention to what you do feel dependent on. Could be an addiction as well. But the warning is to not use your sting, because Scorpios are very sharp to hurt someone just because you're feeling vulnerable during this release. Not that it's like a massive threat or anything. Just be very, attentive to how you talk to people at this time. And then tension could spike sharply on the 10th, because Mercury in your first house will be making another opposition to Uranus in your 7th house. We had this in November. It's coming back. And so this is a critical transit because it directly impacts how you relate to others. And so Uranus here is kind of shaking up the very mechanics of your connections and how you relate to others. And so you could find yourself blurting out a hard truth that really shifts the dynamic of a connection, or you could just feel feel a sudden urge to rebel against the way that you've been relating to people, craving a lot more freedom in your connections and how you connect in general. And because Mercury rules your nervous system here, I'd pay attention to your body cues at this time. And so the key is to stay grounded. If the way you relate shifts now, it's likely because the old method of connecting was too stagnant and no longer serves you. Listen to your body no matter what. And then the energy will shift dramatically on the 15th when your ruler of Mars enters Capricorn, which activates your third house of communication. And this is your power moment because Mars, like I said, is exalted here. And this kind of turns your mind into a weapon or a tool with very high precision. And so you could become incredibly persuasive, strategic, or sharp, or maybe your thoughts could just become a little bit more clear at this time, which is good on so many fronts because Sagittarius is a little bit scattered. And so maybe you could launch a writing project. Maybe you dominate a negotiation, or you take charge of a situation involving your immediate environment. Take what resonates with that. And your mind is a weapon at this time. Just be aware of it and use it right. And then on the 19th, the new moon in Sagittarius offers such a good reset in your second house of resources. And so you could feel ready to set new financial goals. Maybe you look at new income streams, or you could just be ready to adopt a new view when it comes to your self-worth or your skills that is very expansive in nature. Like maybe you finally hone in on your skills, or you decide to adopt a new skill. However, though, because the moon squares Saturn in your fifth house, this isn't easy worth. It's money or resources or a sense of self-worth or a utilization of your skills that comes from discipline. Or you may have to be very creative with how you exercise your resources and your desires at this time, as overspending or feeling very limited or caged in could be a risk. And so you may have to sacrifice a luxury or a fun hobby, for example, to build your savings, which will only apply to some people. Or maybe people who have kids, like maybe you require extra spending for them at this time, or maybe just in general you feel limited in your, expression of creativity because you don't feel good enough or you don't feel worthy enough. And so the opportunity here is to structure your resources in a way that actually works. Think smarter, not harder. Think outside the box. You have your second house in Sagittarius. You can do it. And this will give you the security you hopefully crave, but not limit your expressions. That is the ultimate win-win scenario. And then the year closes with the sun entering Capricorn on the 21st, which joins Mars in your third house. And so daily life could get a little bit more busy. Maybe you're running more errands, taking meetings, and connecting with your local community. Maybe your identity will either be pulled towards pursuits, or they'll kind of demand these pursuits, but you could also just be recognized at this time for your communication. Maybe people come up to you for answers because you're the one who's done all the research, or you're the one who knows how to handle, the dilemma they have, and maybe they trust you. That could apply to some people as well. And then around this time, you will be having Jupiter in your ninth house, making a square to Chiron in your sixth house. So you could have a big vision for travel or education, or to just expand your life in some way, but maybe a health issue or a work obligation flares up, which really makes you question if you can handle it. And so the lesson here is that you don't have to be perfectly healed or to have a perfectly empty schedule to pursue your dreams. You can expand and manage your routine at the same time, which I know is very hard with the structure of society today. But if you listen to your body cues, it might actually give you the answers you need to resolve that. And then finally, we will be having Venus also entering Capricorn on the 24th, which kind of smooths over that third house. And so if Mars made your words a little bit too sharp, or maybe your thoughts or communications were a little bit tough, Venus is going to add the honey to your thoughts and your communications. So maybe you could receive a beautiful message, or perhaps you just find that your thoughts are feeling more graceful or even creative at this time. And it really is a great time to turn your thoughts into beautified form. Maybe you feel more creative and you're able to express yourself a little bit easier, or you could just go on a local exploration and really soak in the experience at this time to help you feel good. And so December really is a month that will empower your voice, because you start the month potentially dealing with heavy emotional and financial entanglements, and maybe even a shock to the way you relate to others. But once your ruler of Mars moves into Capricorn, you snap into focus. And so you stop reacting to others and start dictating on your own terms. And the universe is handing you the pen and asking you to write your own contract for the coming year. And if you use that Mars energy to communicate clearly and strategically, there's nothing you cannot negotiate, and you will go into this new year strong. Sagittarius, this is your birthday season. Happy birthday to you. And so that solar light, that sun will be firmly on you for a lot of the month, especially at the beginning. And the month will begin with you as kind of like the main character, even if it's in your own story. And so your energy could feel very fiery, maybe personal, and you could feel a little bit physically active, or at the very least excited to take on life. And you are likely redefining who you are and where you are going, or you could just feel very awake. But as the month progresses, the focus will shift distinctively from your identity to your assets or your worth. And so you'll be asking, who am I at the beginning of the month? And you will eventually move on to asking, what am I worth? And so it is a month of high vitality. And this is followed by a serious drive to secure the bag and prove your value to yourself, but also maybe even the world. And so the month is going to kick off with a pivotal moment regarding how you relate to others, because the full moon will be taking place in Gemini on the 4th, lighting up your 7th house. And so this isn't just about partners or romance, like some people say. This is about the mirror that others provide for you and the mechanics of your one-on-one connections. And so maybe you see your own reflection in the way you connect or negotiate or deal with like people, whether you like them or whether you don't. Or you could decide to formalize the way you relate. Maybe you're signing a contract at this time. Maybe you just simply realize that a certain style of connection has run its course and needs to end. And because this is happening opposite your ascendant, you are seeing yourself clearly through the lens of another. And so the opportunity here is to really balance your independence with your style of connection. Pay attention to how others make you feel, not as like a reflection of them, but as a reflection of you, no matter if it's like a good or bad message. And then the warning is to avoid projecting your own restlessness onto any dynamics you have, and make sure you aren't picking a fight just to create excitement. Not that you would, but just be aware of your own irritability. Sometimes it's an issue with you and not them, and that's what this full moon could teach you. However, the real tension could arrive around the 8th when Mars, which is currently in your 1st house of self, will be making a square to Saturn in your 4th house of home and family and your innermost self. You are currently hosting Mars, which gives you a massive surge of physical energy, confidence, and a desire to move fast. But Saturn is still in your 4th house or within your private self. And so maybe you'll want to focus on yourself, for example, launch a personal project or build a sense of confidence, but maybe a family obligation, landlord issue, or maybe just a heavy emotional atmosphere from within forces you to pump the brakes a little bit. It kind of feels like you're driving like a nice car with the parking brake on, and it's kind of like doing that stop start thing where you just want to go, but it won't go. And it's a little frustrating. And so this frustration could manifest as heat in your face, or maybe tension in your hips and your thighs. So I'd pay attention to your body cues around this time, because it'll tell you where you need to go and it'll tell you what you need to balance. Because trust me, this transit will be short-lived. You'll eventually have your moment. Just weather the storm at this time. That's all I can say. And then on the 10th, Mercury in your 12th house of the subconscious will be opposing with Uranus in your 6th house. It's already happened in November. It's happening again. And so this is very electric energy, and it could be internally felt. And this, like I said, isn't the first time we dealt with this. So pay attention to, the mental scatteredness of November, because you will be addressing these themes again. And so maybe a subconscious thought or a secret or an intuitive hit could bubble up that really disrupts your daily health or your routine. Or maybe the other way around. Maybe you feel a sudden need to take a mental health day because your nervous system is fried from all of the data that you're processing and all the work that you're doing. And so the key is to listen to that urge. Your body is trying to integrate something that your mind hasn't caught up to yet, and your nervous system is the compass at this time. So if you're feeling a little bit off, pay attention to what you're doing when that feeling sparks, because it could be trying to tell you something. The energy will then again shift on the 15th when Mars enters Capricorn, moving into your 2nd house. And Mars here, it's very driven by tangible results, and the fire in your 1st house will cool down a little bit, and that drive is going to be directed either towards money, your possessions, maybe your self-worth and your self-esteem and your skills. And so you stop fighting for your identity and you start fighting for your worth. It's time to build something with your newfound drive at this time. And so you could feel a sudden, maybe even aggressive ambition to make more money, maybe ask for a raise, maybe you audit your spending habits, or maybe you just pursue things with the intention of increasing your value or your self-worth, even if that's felt a little bit more internally. And you are energized by the tangible, and you are energized by results, and you are going to be working to build something regarding your worth at this this time, and you want results that you can hold in your hand or at least prove. But the headline event for you is going to be the new moon in Sagittarius on the 19th, because this is in your first house. This is your personal lunar new year of sorts. And so it's the most powerful time of 2025 to really reinvent yourself. You can change your hair, update your wardrobe, or launch a brand new path for yourself, whether it's like an internal path of who you want to be or an external path of what you want to do. But because the moon will square Saturn in your fourth house, this reinvention isn't without a little bit of guilt. Maybe you feel like you're choosing yourself and this is somehow letting your family down. Or maybe your new identity clashes with your roots and maybe it goes against your conditioning, which can be very tough, even if that conditioning needs to be let go. Letting go of conditioning is one of the hardest things you can do. And so the opportunity here is to really assert your independence no matter what, because you are allowed to outgrow your past and to grow into who you want to be. And then as the month closes, the sun will be entering Capricorn on the 21st, which joins with Mars in your second house. And so the focus is now entirely on stability. You are less concerned with the adventure and expansion within yourself and more concerned with what you begin to build for yourself. This is actually making stuff happen. And so you could find yourself organizing your possessions, maybe planning your financial year for 2026, or simply enjoying the comfort of good food or luxury and taking on pursuits that are designed to build your worth in some way. And then your chart ruler of Jupiter, which is in your 8th house, making a square to Chiron in your 5th house around this time, could be very tender. And we had something similar a few months ago before Jupiter went retrograde. And so you could be doing a deep emotional work regarding your intimacy, maybe your shared resources, and maybe you're working on your psychological self and healing. And this triggers a wound related to your inner child or your ability to express yourself and your creativity. Maybe you're scared to put yourself out there, or maybe you fear that getting too deep, for example, or merging too closely with others will stifle your joy or your freedom. It can go both ways. And so the healing here comes from realizing that true intimacy or embracing the deep psychological healing actually expands your ability to play. And then finally, Venus will be entering Capricorn in the 24th, joining that Capricorn party. And this is wonderful for your self-esteem and your wallet. And fun fact, I got a job that doubled my salary 2 cycles ago when Venus entered my cycle. And then I bought a condo last time it entered my second house. And so you are likely to receive a gift or a bonus, or to simply just feel good about what you see in the mirror, even if it's not a tangible thing that you achieve. Or you could just be inspired by your worth and your skills in some way very creatively. You're going to value quality over quantity right now, whatever it is that you pursue. And if love is relevant, which it only is for some people, you'll want your current partner, or you will crave a future partner who makes you feel secure and valued, not just someone who is fun or someone who takes things too lightly. And so pay attention to that as well. And so December is a month of really reclaiming your power, because you start the month by dealing with friction between who you want to be and where you come from. But as the month progresses, you break free from that tension and channel all that energy into building a solid foundation for yourself. You end the year feeling richer, both financially and within your self-worth, which is the perfect way to start the new year. Capricorn risings this month really will feel like a distinct turning point for you, almost like a massive energetic rebirth. And so as the month begins, you will feel like you are operating in the shadows or behind the scenes. Maybe you feel a little bit lower energy or just very introspective. And you could also be having some funky sleep or some weird ass dreams, as this is relevant to the 12th house, especially with Mars being in there. But the headline news for you is the shift happening mid-month where Mars will finally be entering Capricorn. Woohoo! Because this is an exalted placement for Mars, and it's your rising sign, meaning you are getting a massive upgrade in your vitality and your personal power. And so you go from feeling invisible or very internal or drained to being the most powerful person in the room, or at the very least, you'll get an energetic boost. You don't gotta be domineering, you know? And so the theme of the month is really embodying your authority, which I know Capricorn risings hear all the time, but it's true. And so you are shaking off the dust of the entire year and stepping into this season with incredible strength and magnetism to help you going into the new year. And so the month opens up with a practical reality check for you during the full moon in Gemini on the 4th, which will be lighting up your 6th house of routine and health. And so this isn't just about your routines or your health, like in a very weird, rigid sense. It's about like your daily service and the rituals that really run your life. It's the things that you do kind of in the mundane world. And so, for example, you could finish a grueling work project, maybe finally get a diagnosis or an answer regarding a health issue, or you might finally decide that your current schedule is simply unsustainable and you actually do something about it because your body will be telling you exactly what it can no longer tolerate. So listen to your body cues on this day. Tap in, listen. That is the only piece of advice that I can really give you that will truly help. And so the opportunity here is really to streamline your life. You could quit the gym class that you hate or delegate that task that's too much work or simply clear your plate. However, friction could arise on the 8th with Mars in your 12th house making a square to your chart ruler Saturn in your 3rd house of communication. And this can be a little bit tricky because Mars in the 12th house often feels like you're driving with the parking brake on. You kind of have this subconscious drive, but you might physically feel like you're a little bit drained or blocked. And squaring Saturn in your mental sector, you could really feel like a heavy sense of mental fog or maybe even anxiety. You could just want to rest, for example, but maybe those emails or those text messages or those mental obligations, they keep nagging at you. And so this is like wanting to go to sleep, but your brain won't shut up, if that makes sense. And so the warning here, watch out for hidden enemies. That's number one, because people who could be smiling to your face could be undermining you when you aren't looking. And so trust your gut. This will only apply to some people. This isn't to scare you. This is very niche people this will apply to. But what I challenge you to do no matter what to help this energy, even if it's like not dealing with enemies and it's just your subconscious, is to do something very mentally busy before bed. Just get it out of your system so that you can finally relax. And then on the 10th, with Mercury in your 11th house making another opposition to Uranus in your 5th house, which did take place in November, this could be a sudden shock to your social or your creative life in some way. Maybe a friend, for example, could say something that completely changes how you see them, or maybe a creative project could take a sudden turn, or maybe there's just something about your role within society that sparks a sudden creative burst out of you. It's very electric and unpredictable, so stay flexible and open-minded on how this can play out. Don't come to any preconceived notions. But then arguably one of the most important transits out there for the year, in my opinion, is on the 15th because Mars enters Capricorn and moves into your 1st house. And as I like to say, it is time to wake up when this happens. This is one of the best feelings in my opinion because Mars, well, A, it's exalted. It works well, and B, it's in your 1st house, which is, energy applied to your body, which is good. You need energy. And so the lethargy of the last few weeks could vanish or replaced by a surge of raw physical power. Maybe you're more ambitious and you are back in the driver's seat in some way. So maybe you could launch a new business, maybe you start a fitness challenge, or you simply just walk into rooms with authority that really makes people listen, or maybe you just don't suffer from that energy drain that you've been dealing with. And trust me, anything is better than that. And so in the body, this could feel like heat and strength. Maybe you feel literally warmer or more prone to inflammation, but you also just feel invincible. And so the best way to use this energy, really advance your personal agenda, focus on yourself, be selfish with the energy, because the worst way that you can use this energy is to become domineering or steamroll people who really can't keep up with you, or to apply your energy to the wrong things and burning yourself out. Don't do that. But then before your birthday season begins, you will be having the new moon in Sagittarius on the 19th, which will be taking place in your 12th house. And this is kind of like a quiet spiritual reset. It is the perfect night or day, whatever you like to do when you're sort of, relaxing in your isolation or your little bubble. It's a really good time to set intentions for what you want to release before your birthday season comes up. And it could also be a good time to get real about your sleep and your methods for releasing subconscious blocks. However, though, because the moon will be squaring Saturn, letting go could be hard because your mind with Saturn in the 3rd house could be analyzing your feelings to death instead of just really feeling them. And so don't try to force this new start. Don't try to force this reset. Just let things happen. Let your thoughts go. Let your subconscious speak out. And so the opportunity here is to accept that you don't need to understand everything logically to heal from it emotionally. And then as the year closes, we're going to be entering Capricorn season, which will be joining with Mars in your 1st house. And so happy birthday to my beautiful Saturnian babies, because the spotlight is now firmly on you and that pretty little face. And so your vitality returns, your confidence peaks, and the world seems to open doors for you simply because you're showing up, which is great. And you are shedding the hermit mode of the 12th house and stepping fully into your identity as long as you're ready to own I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on YouTube, who you are, who the F you are. I'm just going to leave it at that. And then around this time, Jupiter in your 7th house of relations will be making a square to Chiron in your 4th house of home. And so maybe you have a massive opportunity for expansion in how you relate to others. Maybe you meet someone new or you deepen an existing bond, but this could trigger old insecurities from your childhood or your family life. Maybe not fitting in or not being able to trust is big with you. And so you might question if you are safe enough to open up, whether it's with new connections or already established ones. And the healing comes from realizing that true connection doesn't require you to be perfect. And so this is what you got to embrace. But then finally, the month ends great for you because Venus is also entering your sign. It is joining the Capricorn party in the 1st house, and this is the glow up transit. And so with Mars giving you strength, Venus will be giving you more beauty or magnetism or creativity, and you are incredibly powerful right now. People could be drawn to you. Maybe they want to be around your stability or your charm, but you could also just feel creatively inspired by yourself in some way. And so this is an excellent time to upgrade your wardrobe, maybe get a haircut or take new photos. Do what makes you feel good at this time because the stars really support it. And so December is a month of true and deep transformation for you, and you spend the first 2 weeks kind of in the spiritual waiting room dealing with the fatigue and the hidden matters. But once Mars and Sun cross your ascendant mid-month, you are launched into the stratosphere. You in the air, looking better, feeling stronger, and commanding more respect than you have in a long time. And the universe is giving you the energy to build whatever it is that you want. Just make sure that you clear out the mental clutter first and allow yourself to heal and really love yourself. Aquarius rising, this month is a distinct journey from the external world to the internal one for you. And so you begin the month in a highly social, maybe collaborative, or at the very least future-oriented headspace. You could be connecting with a network or looking at the big picture as well as your hopes and dreams. However, as the planets shift into Capricorn mid-month, the energy takes a very sharp turn inward. And so you enter your annual period of hibernation and your spiritual review at this time. And so the theme of this month for you is a sacred pause because the universe is asking you to celebrate your wins early in the month so that you can rest and recharge your battery before your birthday season begins next year. And so the month will be kicking off with a burst of joy during the full moon in Gemini on the 4th, which lights up your 5th house. 5th house transits are the best, by the way. I'm dealing with it right now. But this is about your creative self-expression, maybe risk, and what brings you pleasure. And this is the most fun full moon of the year for you, in my opinion. So maybe you could wrap up a creative project or have a realization about what brings you joy, or simply attend a party or a gathering where you feel fully alive and seen. It'll differ for everybody. Some people are introverts, some are extroverts, but it will call you to tap into your joy no matter what that looks like. It could feel exciting and expressive in a lot of ways. And so the opportunity here is to let your inner child take the wheel. Just give it the wheel just for a little bit. And the warning is to avoid drama in your romantic life or with your own ego if that's relevant for you. And so the energy is high, and the small spark can kind of turn into a really big fire if you're not careful. However, one of the most critical transits for you happens on the 10th because Mercury in your 10th house of career and public reputation will be making an opposition to your modern ruler of Uranus in your 4th house of home, just as it did in November. And this is a key transit because it could continue the saga of a sudden shock or disruption that really creates like this pool between your public duties or maybe your private life. Maybe you could receive an unexpected surge in work. Maybe your job gets busy, which makes relaxing at home harder. Or maybe even the opposite, maybe a sudden household emergency, maybe like a burst pipe in your house, your pipes start leaking, or something more emotional or internal, or something with a family member. It'll differ for everybody. It could pull you away from your public ambitions. And so because this involves your ruling planet, your nervous system will feel electric and perhaps a little bit fried. And so listen to it. The best way to handle this transit, stay flexible. Do not try to control the chaos. Listen to your nervous system and let the tower moment happen, as it's likely freeing you from some obligations that you didn't actually want, and it can help you find a better work-life balance. And then the vibe will shift dramatically on the 15th when Mars enters Capricorn, moving into your 12th house of the subconscious. And this is kind of another key shift because Mars is exalted here, meaning it is incredibly powerful. But what I will say is it is operating within the hidden realm of your chart, your 12th house. And so your physical energy energy levels regarding the outside world may drop a little bit, but your psychological drive at the very least will skyrocket. And so you aren't lazy at this time. You're just processing. Let yourself process. And Mars in the 12th house is like working in a secret laboratory of sorts because you have a lot of drive, but it's kind of happening behind closed doors and you don't really have the result of that yet. And so you could be working on a project in secret, or you could find yourself fighting hidden enemies. And sometimes these hidden enemies are yourself. Maybe it's your own self-sabotaging habits. And so pay attention to that. And then in the body as well, this can manifest. Maybe you have very vivid, active dreams or a feeling of heaviness in your limbs. I know my dreams get weird when Mars is in my 12th house. And so maybe you just need to sleep more than usual. So let yourself have that sleep. If you are the type who like to relax at home and you say, oh, I don't have time to sleep because I want me time, you time is best spent sleeping at this time. I just want to say that. And then on the 19th, the new moon in Sagittarius will be activating your 11th house. And so this is kind of a fresh start for you in your social circle or maybe your long-term dreams. And so maybe you could join a new organization or set a new vision for your future. And this can play out internally or externally. However, because this moon will be squaring Saturn in your second house, you're going to have to count the cost. For example, maybe you have a brilliant vision for what you want to do in the future, maybe like a social media idea, for example, but you need to figure out how to fund it. Or maybe your budget feels like it's blocking you from a large pursuit that you want to do in some way. And so the opportunity here is to network with people who are either older or maybe more established or experienced than you, so they can help you use your Aquarian energy to innovate in a way where your dreams aren't really tied down to the weight of the wallet. And this can apply to friendships as well. Maybe you're not actually going after some big cause. Maybe you just you can't spend time with friends because your wallet's not doing too good. And so find a unique way to spend time with them if that's relevant. As the year closes, the sun will be entering Capricorn on the 21st and joining Mars in your 12th house. And so the world gets quieter for you. At the very least, your inner world will get louder. And so you are in the void before your rebirth next month. And so you could decline a holiday party invite in favor of staying home. Maybe you meditate more, or maybe you just simply enjoy being alone at this time and you need more time to recharge and listen to your subconscious. Really listen to your body cues at this time. You don't have to be a complete hermit if you don't want to, but if you feel the call to, please do it. And you could find hidden meanings or messages in the most unexpected places. And around this time as well, Jupiter in your 6th house will be squaring with Chiron in your 3rd house. And so you could have a big opportunity to expand your work life or your health routines, but maybe like a communication issue or a negative thought pattern could start to flare up, making you doubt your intelligence in some way. Maybe you worry that you don't have the right words to explain your new process. And so when it comes to articulating yourself and managing your day-to-day life, healing will come from realizing that whatever work you do in life, it'll speak for itself. You don't always have to explain it. And then finally, Venus will be entering Capricorn on the 24th, which really brings a sense of peace to your solitude. And this is a beautiful transit for either secret romance or maybe simply fall in love with your own company and your dreams become a little bit more pleasant. Maybe you find great healing and therapy, maybe spiritual retreats or acts of charity where you don't really get credit. And so you're kind of finding the beauty in that unseen realm or in the things that nobody else sees, which is a great way to enter that new year, very healing. And so December asks you to kind of fade in the background, but not for the sake of, being invisible, but for the sake of recharging to be ready for the next year, because you start the month dealing with the noise of career shocks and social demands, but the universe will quickly guide you into a sacred pause. Don't fight the urge to rest mid-month. You are clearing out the psychological clutter of 2025 so that when the sun enters your sign in January, you are light, free, and ready to lead. Pisces risings, this is such a big month for you because your chart ruler of Jupiter is still active, but your modern ruler of Neptune is also waking up by going direct. And so you are moving through a period of high visibility or high activity at the very least within your career and your public life and your ambitions, but you are also dealing with a deep internal restructuring of sorts. And so the month begins with the tug of war between your professional ambition, what you want to do in the world, and your own personal limits. And you are being asked to step up and lead, but you have to do it in a way that's sustainable for your body and your spirit. And then by the end of the month, that pressure will lift and you will find your support system and realize that you don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders alone, which is is such a great way to end the year. And so the month will open up with a focus on your private life with the full moon in Gemini on the 4th, which will be lighting up your 4th house of home, your roots, your innermost self. And so this is a major point for you in terms of your family life or your sense of inner security. And so maybe you finally finish a home renovation, maybe you sign a lease, or you at the very least resolve an emotional situation with a parent or a family member, or maybe you just simply resolve a deep-seated fear from your childhood. And so somatically, this could feel like a need to nest. Maybe there's a heaviness in your body that asks you to rest and to really ground yourself. And so pay attention to your body at this time, because that's how you know that you really need this reset. And so the opportunity here, create a sanctuary, create a home, create an environment, whether internal or external, that supports the busy career month again, something where you can really recharge. However, the most key and difficult transit for you, or at least the very active one for you, will be happening on December 8th, because Mars is in your 10th house of career and makes a square to Saturn in your 1st house of self. And so you could have a massive drive, for example, to achieve professionally. Perhaps a boss is pushing you, or you are launching a project, but Saturn in your 1st house kind of puts a stop sign up. So you could feel physically exhausted, or you could face a personal blockage where you simply don't have the bandwidth or the confidence to meet the demands that are being placed on you. It's kind of like hitting the gas and the brake at the same time in a car. It doesn't know what to do. And so the warning here, it's very clear. So if you really try to force your way through this, you will burn out. And so you must respect your physical limits. It's not about pushing your body, but finding a hack to let you and your goals coexist without sacrificing one. And then on a brighter note, on the 10th, your modern ruler of Neptune goes direct in your 1st house. This is a massive energetic shift. And so the brain fog that has plagued you for months begins to lift. You feel a return of your intuition and your sense of self that might have felt lost for a bit. And because Neptune trines Jupiter at the same time, which is your traditional ruler, you could have a sudden burst of creative inspiration or even just a spiritual breakthrough that reminds you of why you are doing all this hard work. And so pay attention to the creative urges and that feel-good energy at this time, because it is leading you on the right path likely. And then the energy shifts on the 15th when Mars enters Capricorn and it moves into your 11th house of community and future goals. And this is a relief because Mars is exalted here. So the pressure moves off of your career performance or your ambitions and onto your network and the nitty gritty of your dreams. And you may become strategic in how you network or how you pursue the resources of your ambitions, because remember, the 11th house is the 2nd house from the 10th house. So it's like the resources of your ambitions. And so you could find yourself organizing a team, leading a group project, or at the very least actively pursuing a long-term goal with like people behind you or a cause behind you, or you could just simply become clearer about what kind of network you do want to build. And Mars here is about collaboration, but you fight better when you fight for a bigger cause likely. And then we will have the new moon in Sagittarius on the 19th, taking place in that 10th house of career, which you kind of need. It's that public ambition house, and it kind of dealt with the aftermath of Mars. And this is kind of like your annual promotion energy or a reset in your public status. Maybe you start a new job, you launch a business, or step into a role of higher authority, or you just simply realize what you want to pursue professionally a lot more clearly. However, because this moon will be squaring Saturn in your 1st house, this new beginning could feel heavy for some people. Maybe you get a promotion, but you realize it comes with more hours than you wanted, or maybe you launch a business, but you feel the weight of the imposter syndrome, or maybe you want to pursue something, but you don't really feel worthy. But the opportunity is to accept the responsibility of what you want and not really give into that imposter syndrome. And you need to know that you are capable of growing into that role. Because you're a Pisces rising, you can really dream up whatever it is you want and achieve it because you have your 10th house in Sagittarius. It means your career expands when you do. And then as the year closes, the sun will be entering Capricorn on the 21st and joining Mars in that 11th house. And so that spotlight will shift entirely to your dreams and potentially your network and the resources of your ambitions. And you are no longer the lone wolf climbing the mountain. You could be surrounded by friends and colleagues or potential causes that really align with you. You could find yourself attending industry events, maybe holiday parties, or simply connecting with people who share your vision for the future. And then around this time, your traditional ruler of Jupiter in the 5th house will be making a square to Chiron. And so you could want to take a creative risk, maybe pursue something romantic, but maybe a deep insecurity about your finances or your self-worth starts to flare up. Maybe you worry you can't afford to be an artist, or you aren't valuable enough to be loved or valuable enough to be celebrated. And the healing comes from realizing that your creativity is actually your greatest asset. I am jealous that you have Cancer in your 5th house, very creative emotionally. And then finally, Venus will be joining that Capricorn party in your 11th house on the 24th. And this is kind of like this beautiful energy for friendship and those long-term goals and causes that we discussed earlier. So maybe you actually reconnect with old friends who make you feel safe, or you could realize that a colleague is actually a great ally. But you could also just feel inspired creatively when it comes to how you want to pursue your larger goals or your social media or whatever it may be. You will simply feel more supported within your goals, no matter how that looks, which is a great way to end the year. And so this month is really a professional crystallization for you, and because you start the month with the friction between your ambitions and your physical reality, and this will be a great maturing moment for you. But then once Neptune goes direct and the planets entering your 11th house start to wake up, you could realize that you have more support than you actually thought, and you are stepping into a position of authority. But the lesson of the month is that true leaders know when to ask for help and when to rest, and this is an important thing for you to carry into the new year. Aries Sun, so your ruling planet of Mars, will spend the first half of the month in your fellow fire sign of Sagittarius, and usually this placement gives your energy a little bit of a boost and encourages a go faster approach to life. However, with the square from Mars to Saturn on the 8th, it creates some real friction in your energy levels potentially. So maybe you feel like a desire to push your agenda or to really exert yourself, but you hit like this sense of external delay, or maybe a heavy sense of responsibility that really feels like it goes against your grain. And this is a test of your endurance, not your speed necessarily. And the full moon in Gemini on the 4th will support your need for emotional clarity and really light up ideas that can help you navigate these roadblocks. And then the vibe will shift a little bit dramatically when Mars enters Capricorn on the 15th. And remember that Mars is exalted here, which means that your ruling planet will be working at a nearly optimal level. Thank goodness, because the frustration from early of the month will turn into this cool and tough and almost relentless drive to get things done. Your identity also shifts from chasing to building when the sun moves into Capricorn. However, you do need to watch out for the Jupiter Chiron square on the 21st. While you are feeling powerful, there could be like this tender spot regarding your self-worth or your past wounds that you really need to admit is there. And the end of the month will offer a chance to solidify your standing, but only if you respect the limits that came up earlier in the month. And so ultimately, this month is a lesson in pacing, and your life force is strong, but it can't be used recklessly against the walls that Saturn have kind of put up at this time. But by slowing down and accepting the stop and go rhythm of the month, you really preserve your energy for when Mars enters Capricorn, which really allows you to end the year feeling accomplished rather than exhausted, and trust that delays are protecting you, not punishing you. Taurus Suns, with your ruling planet of Venus moving through Sagittarius for most of the month, your usual steady and grounded nature could feel a little bit more restless and adventurous than normal, and you may find your identity is pulling away from, more grounded things and more towards big ideas. However, the defining moment for your energy levels or your vitality or your ego this month is the opposition between Mercury in Scorpio and Uranus in your sign taking place on the 10th, and this could be a shock to your system. Maybe you experience sudden shifts in how you view yourself or how you communicate your presence with others. And while this can feel shaky, it really breaks up any points where you're being stagnant. And then the new moon in Sagittarius on the 19th will meet up with your ruler of Venus, but the square to Saturn and Neptune could introduce this almost sobering up effect. And so your desires could feel clouded by a little bit of confusion or maybe restricted by reality. And it isn't until Venus enters Capricorn on the 24th that you will return to your natural rhythm and really feel like yourself again. And so the earth energy will stabilize your sense of self, and it grounds this buzzy energy of the earlier month into something really tangible and potentially committed. And the month asks you to ride the waves of instability without losing your core values and eventually landing on solid ground. And so in short, your identity is undergoing a rapid stress test followed by a period of necessary solidification. And so don't let the mid-month shocks drain your battery. Instead, view them as necessary breaks from a routine that's no longer really serving you. And by the time Venus enters Capricorn, you will feel more like yourself. You will feel grounded, secure, and ready to build. Gemini Suns, December really puts a spotlight on your energy levels because the full moon is taking place in your sign on the 4th, and it really marks a turning point for your identity. And so maybe you're likely to feel seen and energized and have mental clarity that really cuts through the noise. However, what I will say is that your ruling planet of Mercury will have a little bit of a bumpy ride. And so starting in Scorpio, it will sit opposite of Uranus and Taurus on the 10th, which really creates a fast-paced mental vibe that could lead to brilliance or burnout, depending on how you use it. And when Mercury enters Sagittarius on the 11th, it will sit opposite of your sun sign, at least by sign. And in astrology terms, this could lead to a feeling of being scattered or really pulled by other people's demands, and you feel like you're spreading your energy thin rather than focusing it. But the challenge could get a little bit harder later in the month as Mercury makes a square to Saturn and Neptune, and so your natural gift for adapting could be tested by a sense of mental fog, or maybe there's some obstacles in your way, and so you could feel like your voice is being quieted, or that maybe your usual quick wit is kind of hitting a wall of serious and heavy reality. But the positive side of this opposition is that it really forces you to slow down and check your facts, and while your energy could feel scattered, the friction really serves as a necessary anchor for you, and it prevents you from floating away into daydreams. And so the takeaway for your ego or your vitality is to really prioritize mental rest, because the stars are asking you to filter your intake and to slow your output. And if you can resist the urge to over-explain or overthink during the squares this month, you will find that all that friction actually sharpens your mind, leaving you with a more resilient and focused sense of self. Cancer Suns, the month is really heavily influenced by the movement of Jupiter through your sign. It's been happening for a while, I know, and this does directly impact your sense of growth and confidence, so it is important. And generally, Jupiter here will act as this sort of magnifying glass for your energy, which urges you to take up more space. However, on the 21st, we will be seeing Jupiter squaring Chiron and Aries, and so the setup really suggests that your growth is triggering a deep tender spot in your being, really regarding your independence or your ability to stand on your own. And you may feel a tension between the urge to take care of everyone around you or to impress people, whatever it may be, and a really painful realization that you have to fight for your own selfhood as well. It's about what you want to do. And then the lunar cycles or the moon cycles this month will also kind of pull at you, because the full moon in Gemini earlier in the month could feel like background noise for your sense of being. You might feel like, I don't know, you're kind of on autopilot during that. But then the new moon in Sagittarius on the 19th will affect you via an opposition, at least by sign. And this new moon, which is being squared by Saturn and Neptune, can make new emotional beginnings feel a little bit heavy or confusing potentially. And so you could struggle to figure out your true feelings versus what others are projecting onto you. And then as Mars enters Capricorn on the 15th, it does sit opposite your sign. And so you could feel like your energy is being drained by confrontation or maybe outside demands. But the key is to use this Jupiter influence still going on to really keep your head above the water, even when the current is rough, because you have so many opportunities to grow this month. And so this really is a month of protecting your light, and your vitality and your ego is really tied to how well you can differentiate your own needs from the emotional demands of others. And by leaning into the confidence that Jupiter could offer, you could navigate the heavy currents without drowning and really emerge with a stronger sense of independence and emotional authority. Leo Suns, as somebody who is ruled by the sun's trip through Sagittarius will naturally really support you by sign, at least because they are both fire, which usually provides a steady flow of energy that can support your ego and charisma. And you'll likely feel an urge to shine in whatever it is that you do. Even if you're an introvert, maybe you'll want to explore and express who you are very loudly, even if it's behind closed doors. However, the planetary weather in Sagittarius is a little bit stormy because the ruler of Sagittarius, which is Jupiter, is in Cancer, and the planets in Sagittarius are squaring Saturn and Neptune throughout a lot of the month. And this means that your natural shine is kind of battling this thick fog. And so you may feel your enthusiasm is being dampened by a heavy sort of energy, or your attempts at clarity could be met with confusion. But then when the sun enters Capricorn on the 21st, your energy will shift from being a little bit more expressive with what you want to do, or your energy levels being very expressive, to being a little bit bit more repressed, but also constructive, and your focus turns towards the work of being you rather than the joy of being you. And this transit kind of lights up the structures of your life, and while it may feel a little bit less vibrant, it is much more productive. And the challenge this month is to maintain your inner fire or your passion without burning out against the walls that Saturn are constructing this month, and use the early month's friction to really refine your ego and allow the restrictions to shape you rather than to stop you. And so ultimately, this month challenges you to find vitality and energy within discipline rather than applause, or rather than, just not tackling the hard things head on. And so embrace the shift towards Capricorn season as a chance to prove to yourself that your identity is solid, even when the external validation feels a little bit quiet. Virgo Suns, your ruling planet of Mercury, will go through a series of stressful aspects that could directly impact to your thinking patterns or even your nervous system. The opposition to Uranus on the 10th could create a little bit of anxiety, maybe scattered thinking, where your usual routine could be disrupted by maybe sudden or chaotic inputs. And as Mercury moves into Sagittarius, it does form a square to your sun sign, at least by sign. And so technically this could create friction, and you could feel like your actions and your thoughts are kind of out of sync, or that the big picture thinking required of you right now lacks the details or the precision that you really crave to feel safe. And then the square from Mercury to Saturn and Neptune later in the month is kind of this critical point for you, because Saturn, as you know, demands structure, but Neptune wants to dissolve it, and your ruler is caught in the middle of that in a sign that it does not like to be in. It does not like to be in Sagittarius. And so you could feel like a crisis of competence, or worry that you are missing details or failing to communicate effectively. However, the positive potential here is huge, because if you can drop the need for perfect order, this transit really does force you to rely on your intuition and patience, and you can hone in on that skill. And then with Mars in Capricorn, which trines your sign from December 15th onwards, at least by sign, this could provide a massive supply of grounded endurance for you and really help you to physically push through mental fog this month. And so the key to maintaining your life force this month is to trust your body over your mind or your anxious mind. And the mental obstacles could feel high, but your physical endurance is receiving a major boost from Mars. So if you can surrender the need for intellectual perfection and just keep putting one foot in front of the other, you will navigate this maze successfully. Libra Suns, your vitality, your energy is really tied to Venus, which spends most of the month in Sagittarius, and this placement usually lightens your load and really encourages a free-spirited or optimistic approach to your ego or your identity or your vitality. However, as Venus is not traveling alone, with the new moon on December 19th meeting up with Venus and being squared by Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, this could create a tricky setup where your desire for harmony or connection could be met with harsh reality checks or confusing signals. You may feel your sense of self-worth going up and down, unsure if you should just commit to something or really let go of it. And the shift will happen on December 24th when Venus enters Capricorn, because while this is a cooler placement, it does square your sun sign at least by sign. And so this introduces a necessary tension because you are being asked to mature your values. The nice approach may no longer work, and you may need to be respected rather than just liked. And so the friction between your airy nature and the earthly demand of Capricorn will push you to firm up your identity. It's less about social grace or maintaining harmony no matter what this month, and it's more about standing your ground in a confusing landscape. And so this transitional period is really asking you to harden your shell slightly, and your identity is evolving from the peacemaker into the builder. And while the friction could feel uncomfortable, it is essential for developing a sense of self-worth that is independent from how others perceive you. Scorpio Suns, the early month features Mercury in your sign making an opposition to Uranus, which is a transit that really wires up your brain, and so you could feel flashes of intense insight or a sudden desire to break free from how people see you. And your identity is really tied to uncovering truths, but with Uranus involved, the truth could be shocking this month. And your traditional ruler of Mars does begin in Sagittarius, which can feel a little bit scattered for your focused intensity, but the real power shift will happen on the 15th when Mars Mars enters Capricorn, because Mars in Capricorn is a sextile to your sign, at least by sign, and represents very highly compatible energy, but it's also exalted in Capricorn, and so it does feel a lot more comfortable here. And this is kind of like this general returning to the command tent, and so your vitality, which could have felt scattered or frustrated by the Neptune squares earlier, suddenly becomes sharp and focused, and so you have the capacity for huge endurance and strategic action for the second half of the month. But the danger lies in the Jupiter Chiron square happening, because as you gain power, maybe old wounds regarding your emotional safety could flare up, and so use the disciplined energy of Mars to work through them rather than letting them sit in the back of your mind. And so in summer, you are really moving from a state of being mentally stimulated to one of physical command, and your energy, your vitality, your life force is best used strategically. Don't waste it on the frustration early in the month. Wait for the shift and then apply your focus with precision, because you have the power to close the year with so much personal strength. Sagittarius Suns, it's your season at the beginning of the month, which is very celebratory, but it could also come with a heavy dose of reality, because with the Sun, Mercury, and Mars until the 15th, and Venus all moving through your sign, the spotlight is firmly on who you are. However, almost all of these planets will square Saturn and Neptune in Pisces at some point. And so technically this is like an unstoppable force kind of running into a brick wall. And so your natural urge to grow, expand, or run, or explore is kind of hitting a wall of obligation or maybe even limitation. So you could feel physically drained by the effort it takes just to be yourself right now. But the new moon in your sign on the 19th, it is a potential reset point, but because of the squares, it is a sober one. And so it asks you to really plant the seeds that are realistic rather than idealistic. And then the entry of Lilith into your sign on the 20th adds a little bit of wild card energy, maybe like a raw gut level demand for freedom that really rejects the restrictions you are currently feeling. And the positive here is that this pressure is really creating a more mature version of yourself. You are learning that true freedom really requires discipline to actually feel it. But the chaos of the month is really refining your energy and cutting the fluff so that only the truth remains. And so consequently, this birthday season, unless your birthday was in November, is all about quality over quantity. And your natural energy right now could be feeling compressed, but this compression is turning that coal into a diamond. And so do not fight the restrictions with recklessness. Instead, use this time to strip away the parts of your identity that were just for show and leave yourself with a core self that is undeniable and real for the new year. Capricorn Sun, so you're kind of like this anchor in the month of the storms that are happening. And so with your ruling planet of Saturn still in Pisces, receiving a square from the Sagittarius planets this month, you are the one who's kind of applying the pressure. And so while this might feel like you are carrying the weight of the world this month, it also makes your sense of purpose so real this month. But the defining transit for your energy or your vitality or your ego this month is that Mars will be entering your sign on the 15th. And remember, Mars is exalted here. Your energy levels, your physical drive, and your ability to conquer obstacles could skyrocket. And where others are confused by Neptune, you could be cutting a path through the jungle to help others see clearly, or even just yourself see clearly if you haven't seen clearly in the past. And then the Sun enters your sign on the 21st, officially marking your season and bringing the Sun-like spotlight onto your identity. And then Venus will join shortly after, which really does help because this cluster of energy in your sign does reinforce your self-worth, and you could be more magnetic this month. However, do be mindful though that Mars in your sign could make you feel a little bit more bossy or overly rigid, and the negative side could be ruthless, but the positive is unshakable sense of like energy level, and this could help you to achieve a lot this month because you are the backbone of the zodiac this month. You're strong but under a lot of tension, and you're in a position of formidable strength, but you should manage this energy wisely because your identity is really being forged in the fire of responsibility, and by accepting the heavy lifting, you kind of prove that your vitality is truly unmatched, but please ensure that you remain flexible enough to bend so that you don't break under your own high standards. That's a warning for this month. Aquarius Suns, your traditional ruler of Saturn, is currently the source of a lot of the month's tension, squaring the planets in Sagittarius for a lot of the month, and this could suggest that your sense of identity is currently being defined by your limitations and your responsibilities, which could feel very heavy. It's like a very heavy vibe in your life force, or like a need to withdraw and conserve your energy potentially. However, with Uranus, your modern ruler, being active in Taurus and opposing Mercury early in the month, this could also create a split in your experience, maybe like a mental restlessness and a desire for change that's battling against a physical need for quiet and structure. And so pay attention to that. And then Mars entering Capricorn on the 15th moves into the space just behind your sign. And so this placement could often direct your energy more inward. And you could find that your energy or your vitality is really best used for behind the scenes work or planning rather than, showing off itself in a very overt way. And then the entry of Pluto in your sign earlier this year is kind of this long-term background hum that is still important, but with the sun entering Capricorn, the focus is on preparation for that big thing that you want to work on in your life. You probably feel like you're destined for something big, but it hasn't really come yet, and so you are really gathering strength this month and dealing with the psychological cleanup before your own season arrives. And so the message for your life force or for your ego or your identity is one of preservation and strategic retreat, because you are not losing your spark, you are incubating it, you are taking care of it. And so use this time to work on the internal architecture of yourself and trust that the quiet work you do now is building the foundation for the power that will arrive when the sun enters your sign next year. Pisces Suns, your vitality, your ego, your identity this month is a mix of clarity and confusion. And with Neptune turning direct in your sign on the 10th, thank goodness, the fog that often surrounds your identity could lift slightly and allow your intuition to really harmonize with that Jupiter and Cancer transit. Your intuition could be on fire this month because this trine really supports a feeling of emotional flow and spiritual confidence. However, Saturn is still also in your sign, and it is being hammered by squares from the Sagittarius planets this month, and technically this really places you at the center of conflict between what is and what could be. And so you could feel an immense pressure to really define yourself, to set boundaries, and to be real in a way that feels uncomfortable for your fluid nature. And the square from Mars early in the month and Sun late in the month to Pisces placements could challenge your physical stamina in some way, so you could feel pushed around by the aggressive energy of others. But the opportunity here is a chance to bring it all together, because Saturn in your sign gives you the absolute rare ability to give form to your dreams if you know how to handle that friction. And if you can handle that friction, you can really make your identity into something tangible, something useful, something that you feel proud of, something confident, rather than just a feeling of being abstract or unimportant. And so this month really offers such a rare opportunity to ground your spiritual nature into the material world in some way. And your energy, your vitality really depends on your willingness to face reality without losing your faith. And if you can stand firm in the face of Saturn's pressure, you will find that your identity becomes less of a shifting tide and more of a powerful but directed current. Aries Moon. So the full moon in Gemini will arrive early in the month, and it really stimulates your internal need for expression, and it allows you to finally verbalize emotions that usually remain raw and physical, and you're going to feel this buzzing, restless energy that urges you to talk through your frustrations rather than just acting on them, which is actually quite healthy for you. However, you do need to be aware that while the new moon in Sagittarius usually supports your need for freedom, the square from Saturn to that new moon will change the vibe, and so you might feel like your usual emotional outlet, maybe movement and spontaneity, is being blocked by a harsh reality check, which could feel a little bit frustrating. And so instead of reacting with a little bit of defensiveness, you are being asked to slow down and sit with the discomfort at this time. And then when Mars enters Capricorn later in the month, it does square your moon, at least by sign, which does create a little bit of friction that demands you mature your emotional responses. And so the opportunity here is to really learn that true safety comes from self-mastery, not just speed. And look, you really do have the energy to master your emotions this month. It's just about, observing them and realizing where they're coming from, and use the information from that full moon in Gemini to really get yourself to a new level. Taurus moons, you could find that the full moon in Gemini feels slightly jarring to your system, so it could introduce this nervous, very mental energy that disrupts your preferred state of calm, which potentially makes you feel ungrounded or a little bit mentally scattered. So please don't rush yourself, whatever it is that you're doing, because you prefer to digest emotions physically, yet this lunation is forcing you to really think about them. And then later on in the month, the new moon in Sagittarius will form a little bit of an awkward inconjunct to your placement, at least by sign, which could create a little bit of subtle irritation where you feel pushed to take a risk that your safety-seeking heart isn't really ready for, and that's completely understandable. However, the true relief will come, thank goodness, when Venus will be entering Capricorn and it forms a trine to your moon by sign. And so this transit restores your emotional equilibrium, reminding you that you are safe when you have a solid plan and tangible boundaries. And so while the month begins with mental noise, it really ends with that deep earthly grounding care that you crave, allowing you to stabilize your internal world through practical self-care. Gemini moons, this full moon is in your sign, and this is basically your annual emotional peak because it really acts as a release valve where your need to be heard and understood takes center stage. It's all about you and your feelings. You're gonna feel your emotions bubbling up, not necessarily as tears, but maybe as like a flood of words, maybe ideas and urgent conversations that help you process your inner state. So just let it all out. However, the new moon in Sagittarius will sit directly opposite your moon, at least by sign. And so this could create a polarity that really challenges you to find the emotional balance through others or like by relying on others rather than just within your own mind. And then this opposition might make you feel pulled in two directions, which really creates a sense of fragmentation, but you can handle this duality. If anybody can handle it, it's you. And so as Mercury navigates complex aspects this month, your challenge is to really quiet your mind enough to actually feel them rather than just narrating your feelings. But the opportunity is to use these, full moons and new moons to really align your head with your heart, finding safety in the truth rather than just the facts. And so really let yourself feel deeply this month. Cancer moons, the full moon in Gemini will occur in the sector that is right behind your sign, and this could feel like a little bit of a subconscious hum. And so it could cause your dreams or your intuition to become incredibly active, but maybe a little bit difficult to decipher. And you could feel a sudden need to hide away just to process the mental noise surrounding you. So please allow yourself that space, please. And then the new moon in Sagittarius will create friction between your need for emotional closeness and the sudden demand for freedom or expansion that feels a little bit unsafe. That's kind of in the air, and this can feel scary. And so you might feel torn between clinging on what you know and the pressure to let it go. And this will depend on what house these transits are happening, so pay attention to that. However, as the Sun and Venus enters Capricorn, they do oppose your moon, at least by sign, which really illuminates your emotional needs through your relationships or through outside forces. And so you are learning that safety doesn't always mean hiding. Sometimes it means standing firm in your vulnerability and allowing others to see your softness as a form of strength. Leo moons, the full moon in Gemini will form a sextile to your moon, at least by sign, which feeds your fire with air and allows you to articulate your dramatic inner world with wit and clarity. You could be very, good at expressing yourself this month, and you could feel a surge of social confidence, using your emotions to really connect with others rather than overwhelming them, and so soak it up. Later, that new moon in Sagittarius will also boost your optimism, but because of that Neptune influence, you could feel a strange emotional fog, really dampening your usual roar. And so you could struggle to find validation at this time, whether it's like from a loved one or whatever it may be, which really forces you to generate that warmth from within. And so then when Mars enters Capricorn, it does form an inconjunct to your moon, at least by sign. And so you may feel a need to adjust your expectations with your goals. And you are learning that true emotional royalty comes from self-approval. That is what comes first. And so the lesson is to let your heart shine even when the audience is silent. And so don't dim your light this month. Really live within it. Virgo moons, the full moon in Gemini will form a square to your moon, at least by sign, which could create conflict between your need for precise emotional categorization and maybe the chaotic, dispersed energy of this lunation. So be gentle with yourself, even if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed. because you could feel mentally anxious. You may try to fix your feelings rather than just feeling them, which could really, send you down a spiral if you're not careful, but it's really a good chance to heal. Similarly, with the new moon in Sagittarius, this forms another kind of square, which really challenges your need for detailed instructions or, to know where everything is within your emotional landscape. And it challenges it with a wave of expansive blind faith that could feel really uncomfortable to your practical nature. And you may feel like you are losing control of the variables that usually make you feel safe. However, thank goodness, as the month progresses and planets shift into Capricorn, you will feel a massive wave of relief. And so the opportunity is to stop overanalyzing every emotional ripple and trust that the earth energy is coming to restore your sense of purpose and calm your nervous system. But also every transit has a message, and it's up to you to listen to it. Libra moons, the full moon in Gemini really activates that air element, which allows you to process your feelings through beautiful flowing conversations, which sounds incredible. This is a good opportunity for you. And so you may feel a sense of lightness and find it very easy to objectify your emotions and also to understand them from a more detached perspective. However, the new moon in Sagittarius could encourage you to seek emotional truth. There will be surrounding planetary tension that could expose imbalances within your relationships or within, how you feel emotionally that you usually try to ignore that are going to be harder to ignore this month. And so you may feel a sudden urge to disrupt the peace in order to find something more authentic. And so when the Sun and Venus enter Capricorn and square your moon, at least by sign, that pressure could intensify and demand you to set hard boundaries to protect your peace. And the lesson here is that true emotional harmony sometimes requires the temporary discomfort of saying no to maintain your own internal equilibrium, but you are brave enough to do it, so you got this. Scorpio moons, the full moon in Gemini will form an inconjunct to your moon, at least by sign, and that can feel like this superficial irritation for you. And so people around you might be chattering about surface level feelings, or it could be very mentally busy while you are navigating a deep internal ocean that doesn't really align with the sort of mental noise that's happening at this time. And so you could feel a need to withdraw to protect your depth from that noise. And then the new moon in Sagittarius, generally it'll feel light to you, but with your modern ruler of Pluto involved in the background, this lunation could trigger a desire to purge old emotional habits that no longer serve your survival, and you seek truth at all costs, and the fog of Neptune could frustrate your investigative nature, although it will be clearer when it goes direct in the 10th. And so, thankfully, as Mars enters Capricorn and forms a sextile to your moon, at least by sign, you will regain your sense of agency. And so the opportunity really is to channel your powerful feelings into a strategic release, finding safety not in secrecy or not in, holding things in, but in disciplined mastery of your own psychological depths. Sagittarius moons, the full moon in Gemini will sit directly opposite your own moon, at least by sign, which creates a polarity that highlights how your need for big picture emotional truth could clash with the factual detailed demands of the moment. And so you could feel emotionally restless, projecting your feelings onto others or feeling boxed in by their questions, or maybe you feel like it's very scattered and it kind of pulls you away from that sense of optimism you like to feel. And then the new moon in Sagittarius, this will be a personal emotional reset, and it's a time to really align your inner compass. But because of the square to Saturn to this new moon, you could feel very heavy or restricted, as if your optimism is being weighed down by responsibility. But this is a rare moment where your natural buoyancy is kind of tested, but you are resilient and you can get through this. And so the challenge is to find freedom within those limitations, realizing that emotional maturity requires staying put and dealing with the now rather than escaping into the next moment. And your expansive heart is being asked to build a container that is strong enough to hold your vision. And this is kind of like a good time to find those leaks that really pull you away from your emotional authenticity and really rebuilding it again so that you can go into the new year ready to tackle your goals with a sense of optimism and a full heart. Capricorn moons, the full moon in Gemini will create a little bit of a nagging sense of unease where the emotional erratic energy of others, or maybe the busy mental energy of the air, could feel draining to your very compact emotional nature. And so you could feel a strong urge to shut down the noise and focus on what is tangible. Trust your instincts at this time. Let yourself rest if you have to. Really live in your own bubble if you have to, and do what you got to do to keep yourself grounded. And then the new moon in Sagittarius occurs in the sign right before yours, which really suggests a need to process feelings in solitude away from the demands of the world. But the major shift will happen when your ruler of Saturn is activated, and then the sun enters your sign, forming a conjunction with your moon, at least by sign. And then Mars and Venus will also go into Capricorn as well. And so this is a moment of emotional crystallization. So you could feel a restoration of your authority over your own feelings. And so while others are spinning out, you could be finding your footing this month, learning that your ability to remain calm is really a gift, provided that you don't build walls so high that you lock yourself out of human connection. Aquarius moons, the full moon in Gemini really creates a circuit of airy energy that helps you to understand your feelings at such a clear level. This is a good full moon for you, and so you could feel a sense of emotional validation through your ideals. Maybe social networks help you, and you really find safety in that collective. Maybe you relate to others a lot emotionally at this time rather than feeling like super personal and isolated. And then the new moon in Sagittarius will also support your placement, which really encourages you to look at the future with hope and optimism. You might be feeling optimistic about your goals, but the influence of Uranus, which is your modern ruler, could suggest this month that sudden flashes of emotional insight could disrupt your usual cool exterior, but really stay curious about them. You could be shocked by how much you actually care about a specific issue. You may try to downplay something, but you shouldn't be downplaying it. And so as the energy shifts into Capricorn, this could bring a more serious tone, and so you are asked to ground your futuristic emotional concepts or your hopes and dreams into reality. And so the opportunity is to stay open to the human experience this month without you losing your unique bird's eye view of the situation, and then you can enter the new year empowered. Pisces moons, that full moon in Gemini could create a sense of mental overwhelm because there is a lot of information going on. Your thoughts might feel a little bit all over the place and scattered. And this could, clash a little bit with your intuitive knowing, but it does present the opportunity to see things from a completely different angle, but you have to protect your energy if you want to access this. And so you could feel exposed or misunderstood as well, as if the world is demanding that you explain feelings that are beyond words. But like I said, this is an opportunity to see yourself from a new angle. And then the new moon in Sagittarius could amplify this because you could feel your emotions expand at this time, but you are a psychic sponge. You have to remember that if Sagittarius expands and Pisces as a sponge, you could expand and take in, a lot of noise that could be very bothersome to you if you don't protect your energy. That is the big theme for you this month. It's to protect your energy. And with your ruler of Neptune stationed direct, your sensitivity is at an all-time high. But it will become a lot more clearer because it is going direct. And thank goodness as well, because Sun and Venus will be entering Capricorn, which will help you kind of ground your feelings. And so the lesson is to use this earth energy to build a spiritual backbone, learning that boundaries don't block connection. They don't block your heart. They protect your magic so it can be sustained. With Mercury in Aries, your mind naturally operates very fast. It can be instinctual, and December is really designed to pour gasoline on those sparks. And the month kicks off with a supportive full moon that really accelerates your processing speed. But the real shift really happens when Mercury goes into Sagittarius, because this pushes your mental processing kind of into the red zone per se, where you could feel like a burning, maybe restless urge to really speak your truth very loudly and very proudly, or your thoughts could be very loud, and you're going to feel very decisive at this time. Maybe you're finalizing plans before others have even opened their message to read the plans. You may be very, excited about things this month, but you do need to watch out for the end of the month when Saturn throws up a roadblock that really demands that you slow down and check the safety details or check the logistics that you may have skipped earlier in the month or about future plans, and really capitalize on this mid-month momentum to break through procrastination if that's a problem you have. But remember that your words are acting as projectiles right now, and so ensure you are aiming at the problem and not the people trying to help you this month. With natal Mercury and Taurus, your mental landscape, it's kind of built on deliberate, methodical grazing. You kind of like to take your time to process things, but December is going to rudely interrupt that peaceful rhythm. That's not to scare you, that's just to get you ready. Because the opposition to Uranus early in the month to transit Mercury could act like a sudden earthquake, which really delivers shocking news or sudden changes to your routine that really force you to make snap decisions without the luxury of your usual contemplation time. So you may have to make split decisions this month. Or maybe you feel a distinct sense of ungrounded anxiety as the world demands speed over substance this month, especially as Mercury moves into Sagittarius and asks you to take a leap before you look. However, this is actually such a big opportunity for you to upgrade your flexibility, because once the planets shift into Capricorn later in the month, you will be able to take all of those scattered, fast-paced developments and lock them into a practical, tangible plan that actually secures your future stability. For people with a Gemini Mercury, you are the main character of the first week because the full moon will be in your sign, your Mercury sign, which could bring a massive climax to the facts or the conversations and the data you've been juggling for the last few months. You could have a mental breakthrough at this time, and your mind is naturally kind of like flitting between topics. You're very investigative and curious, but the month will really amplify this into like a high-speed data storm where you will feel the electricity charged, and this will really help you to carry out a lot of things. And as your ruler of Mercury moves into Sagittarius, the challenge will shift from kind of gathering the facts to finding the meaning and everything, and you could struggle with a sense of scattered focus where you are starting 10 sentences for every one that you finish. And so the key sensation here is kind of like this buzzing, nervous energy that really needs an outlet. And so use the time to finalize big picture ideas, but be prepared for a harsh reality check from Saturn that could force you to deliver on promises you made in the heat of the moment. This is a month where you will be held accountable for everything you say. Cancer Mercuries, your thoughts are really filtered, not just through emotion. I know that's what some people say, but it's through your intuition. You're the type who can really read the vibes. And I know a lot of brilliant Cancer Mercuries. And this month will bring such a tidal wave of intuitive insights for you because the early water trines really harmonize with your mind, at least by sign, which allows you to articulate deep, maybe even tender and vulnerable feelings that usually could stay hidden, which gives you the power to really nurture and take care of yourself and your own needs or even others simply through the warmth of your voice and your communications. It's a great time to be open. However, because the energy is kind of going to shift into a little bit of a blunt sign with Sagittarius, you could feel a sudden sense of vulnerability as if the protective shell around your private thoughts has kind of been cracked open, but not in a good way. And so it is vital that you do not retreat into silence when conversations get loud. Instead, you can really lean into that Jupiter influence in your sign, which really grants you protective wisdom, so you can bridge the gap between the head and the heart right now, teaching others that true intelligence does require emotional depth. With a Leo Mercury, your mind is kind of like this creative stage where every thought is a performance, not like in a fake way, but you just have like a flamboyant way of thinking. It can be very intelligent. And the trine from Sagittarius, at least by sign, really energizes your mental thought patterns, and it could erase self-doubt. And so you could replace any hesitation with a really strong sense of certainty that your perspective is not only valid, but it is essential. You could experience like a state of creative flow where stories and jokes start to land perfectly, and you could feel a warm desire to lead others through your vision. This will only apply to some people, but the danger though is getting lost in your ideas in a way that really pulls you away from the practicality of real life, although you do have an opportunity to take things more seriously as planets start to enter Capricorn later in the month. And so the end of the month at the very least requires that you keep that spark about yourself, keep that spark regarding your ideas, but learn to use your mental processes in the more mundane parts of life, because this is the best way to keep your sanity through the scattered but potentially buzzing energy of the month. Virgo Mercury's, your mind really functions like a high-precision lens, which makes the broad, very messy energy of Mercury in detriment in Sagittarius feel particularly challenging. And so you could feel a constant friction where you are desperate for data or clarity, and you really want to communicate your point clearly sometimes. And the world could offer very vague generalizations. Maybe they don't understand you. I deal with this a lot. I'm a Virgo Mercury. I send an email. I outline things clearly. I try to shorten it because I know people don't like to read and they go, wait, what? That's kind of what this could bring. And so you could feel a sensation of mental clutter or anxiety as things change rapidly. And this is a masterclass in adaptation because the square from Saturn later in the month to transit Mercury is really pushing you to prioritize efficiency over perfection. It forces you to trust your competence even when you cannot control things. And so if you can stop trying to fix every error and just instead, embrace the rough draft, you can navigate this month successfully because sometimes the mess is where the magic happens. Because if you spend too much time on something and it's not even going to work, then why are you doing it, Libra Mercury, your mental process is really designed to weigh options. You are very balanced and you like to find equilibrium, and the full moon in a fellow earth sign will really light up the sector of, how you learn. You will be able to adopt and learn information very easily at this time, and this can create a very good atmosphere for you to understand things. You will feel like a good mediator if this is applicable, and you'll be able to see multiple perspectives clearly and really weave them into conversations. However, as the month progresses, the fiery Sagittarius energy might demand you to pick a side in a way that feels uncomfortable and disrupts your peace. And so the challenge is to avoid decision fatigue or people pleasing. I know you hear this all the time, but it really is a risk this month. But use your diplomatic skills to really deliver hard truths that others are avoiding and really take the big picture into consideration, especially with it being in Sagittarius. And trust that your natural grace will allow you to direct without being divisive because your voice is the bridge. So don't be afraid to walk across it. Scorpio Mercury, your mind is like you're a detective. You can constantly scan for the truth. You guys are the investigators, the sleuths, and the opposition to Uranus from transit Mercury in your sign will act kind of like a lightning bolt to your mental foundation. And so this transit will likely deliver sudden news, maybe a radical shift in perspective. Maybe you'll have that breakthrough aha moment with that deep research that really shatters maybe a long-held suspicion and really forces you to rebuild your strategy from the ground up. But this is what you wanted, because you want the truth as a Scorpio Mercury. And so you can feel an intense buzzing nervous tension as your brain processes this information at rapid pace. But once Mercury moves into Sagittarius, you are being asked to release the heavy psychological weight that you've been carrying. This is not the time to dig your heels into, trying to get everything figured out. Rather, it is an opportunity to use that breakthrough to liberate yourself. And if you can surrender your need for total control and allow for the truth to be what it is, you will end the month with such deep clarity. Sagittarius Mercury, with Mercury going into your sign in the middle of the month, it's kind of like your Mercury return, which really reboots your cognitive operating system. You'll feel mentally fresh and you will align your natural blueprint of honesty and expansion, and you could feel a tremendous surge of mental vitality and a burning desire to preach your truth or to at least communicate it. And you are seeing the world through a wide angle lens that spots opportunities that others are missing. But this is not a free pass to be like reckless and do whatever you want, because the square from Saturn and Pisces eventually acts kind of as like this sobering reality check, because your grandest ideas may face bureaucratic walls or confusing emotional delays, and you might feel like you are a revving sports car in traffic, but the resistance is actually trying to teach you discipline. You got to use your mind in the right direction this month and ensure your words are backed by wisdom so that they can withstand this pressure, because if you can do that, you can really come up with some great mental breakthroughs this month. Capricorn Mercury, you're kind of like the architect of the zodiac mentally. You're very built for strategy and long-term calculation. And while the rest of the world kind of gets lost in like the noise, you're kind of quietly gaining your power this month, because the scattered energy early in the month could feel a little bit annoying to your nature. But as planets begin to stack up in your sign later in the month, you're kind of going to feel this satisfying locking in feeling of your mental abilities. And so you are currently in a phase of deep preparation where your thoughts are less about expression and more about execution. You are really trying to get things done mentally this month, and this really allows you to filter out the emotional drama and focus on what is actually useful. And a lot of your plans this month could be a little bit behind the scenes, because as you know, Mercury is also in Sagittarius, which is one sign before your natal Mercury. And so you'll really be drafting the blueprints for next year, and your ability to command respect could be peaking at this time, which really allows you to secure commitments that will stand the test of time. Aquarius Mercury, your mind is naturally wired for the future. You operate in flashes of insight, and you could be kind of genius, kind of psychic, kind of, futuristic. You can see things that others can't. And this month's energy kind of provides a stimulating environment for your genius to thrive. It's a great month for you mentally. And the Gemini full moon will electrify your intellect because it really connects you to the collective consciousness in a way that allows you to download innovative solutions before anybody else sees them coming. Listen to your intuition this month, and you could feel like mentally buzzed and eager to experiment, but be aware of the volatile Uranus opposition made this month to transit Mercury because it could make your communication feel a little bit glitchy or erratic to those who rely on conventional logic, and it is really crucial that you do not detach so completely that you kind of lose the human connection within your mental processes, because you need to translate your ideas into a language that people can actually understand. Network with people that you trust, but also network, in settings that you can really feel like you can be yourself, but also make your language a little bit more practical so that your language can actually solve problems that everybody else is stuck on, because you can be a voice of reason this month. Pisces Mercury, your mind really flows like a river. You're very intuitive. You can pick up more than just, what you can see in front of you. You pick up on vibes rather than rigid syntax. And this makes the harsh, direct squares from Sagittarius feel maybe a little bit abrasive to your mental processes this month. And so you could feel as if though you're trying to speak underwater. Maybe your words struggle to reach the surface, which really leads to some moments of mental fog, or maybe you don't feel like you're being heard. And the pressure from Saturn in your sign could add a heavy layer of seriousness, perhaps making you doubt your own intelligence. But there's a good opportunity because Neptune's going direct in your sign, so your intuition will actually be on lock by the middle of the month. But this friction is also inviting you to give form to that intuition. So instead of escaping into silence when logic demands that do something else, channel your thoughts into mediums where maybe traditional structure doesn't apply, like grammar. You can do art, you can communicate yourself with spoken poetry, or maybe just use a lot of metaphors. And if you weather the confusion, you will find that your intuition is far more accurate than any spreadsheet. And so trust the images in your mind this month because they are speaking a language that is truer than words. Aries Venus, this month, the fiery energy of Venus and Sagittarius will harmonize really beautifully with your natal Venus. And so you are feeling a surge of adventurous passion, particularly around the 19th when the new moon makes a conjunction with Venus and Sagittarius. And this is really a moment where your desire for novelty and freedom in relationships or your passions could peak. However, you do need to be mindful of December 8th and the 14th when your planetary ruler of Mars makes a square to Saturn and Neptune. And so you could feel like your foot is on the gas while the universe is really slamming into the brakes, maybe in love. This could manifest as a frustration that things aren't moving fast enough. Or in passions, it could feel like you're hitting a wall, for example. And then when Venus is in Capricorn on the 24th, the vibe will shift entirely. The passion will remain, but you are asked to channel into something sustainable. It's no longer just about the thrill or the spark. It's about really building something that lasts. It's about stoking that fireplace, if that makes sense. And that's how you'll end the year. Taurus Venus, the majority of December could feel slightly frantic to your taste, if that makes sense. It could feel like things are all over the place. And with so much energy in Sagittarius, the atmosphere is loud and fast-paced, which could feel ungrounded to your steady Venus sign. And then the December 10th opposition between Mercury and Uranus in your sign is the wild card. So expect sudden conversations or unexpected news regarding what you value or what you own. And you may feel a need to break a routine just to feel alive at this time. But your relief will arrive around Christmas, around the 24th, when Venus enters fellow Earth sign of Capricorn. This is when you can take that exhale, because the chaotic energy will settle into a more practical, sensual rhythm that will really make you feel safe. And so use the end of the month to solidify commitments and enjoy the tangible fruits of your labor. Gemini Venus, the December 4th full moon in your sign will put your needs front and center. And so you are gaining massive clarity on what you need from a partner or from your passions to really feel stimulated. And because the transiting Sun, Mars, and Venus will be opposite your sign for a lot of the month, relationships, especially with, the Venus expression, more so than passions, are going to be the main stage if it's relevant. And so you could be acting as a mirror for others, whether platonic or romantic or with with your family. And then the December 19th new moon will invite a new chapter within how you pursue partnership, but the square to Neptune will suggest that you may be viewing someone through rose-colored glasses, so look out for that and ensure you are falling for the person, not the potential, or you are seeing people as they are. And with Mercury, your ruler, entering Sagittarius on the 11th, honest and direct speech becomes very necessary for you, so just be careful not to say things that you can't take back, and that is how you will end the year. Cancer Venus, your love language is emotional safety, nurturing, deep bonding. And so with Jupiter currently in your sign, you're still in your year of expansion, but December 21st brings a specific trigger as Jupiter makes a square to Chiron. And so in love and values, this could expose a vulnerability where you really feel like you're giving too much and receiving not as much as you should, whether it's within a passion or romance, take what resonates. And then the Sagittarius energy earlier in the month could force you to look at the big picture of your connections and your passions rather than just the immediate feeling. The question will become, are your emotional investments growing? And then the shift of Venus into Capricorn on the 24th will make an opposition to your natal Venus, at least by sign. And this is a classic opposites attract transit. And so if you are looking for love, for example, maybe you attract people who are very serious, stoic, and focused on duty, or with your passions, maybe you're focusing less on the feeling and more about actually getting your craft together. And so this is the time that is really teaching you boundaries, and you are putting your softness into whatever it is that you do. Leo Venus, your love language is adoration, creative expression, and grand gestures, and you are thriving on the Sagittarius energy this month because it forms a supportive trine to your natal Venus, at least by sign, which really fuels your creativity and your desire to be seen. The December 19th new moon as well is such a potent time for you to set intentions around romance or joy, and it's a fresh start for your heart center. However, because Mars is making a square to Neptune around the 14th, really be wary of financial or romantic mirages. You might be tempted to spend extravagantly, for example, on an aesthetic or a person or a gift, really to chase a feeling that isn't real. And then when the sun enters Capricorn on the 21st, the party will start to calm down a little bit for you, and the focus will shift on, how does this look? Is this being expressed properly? To what is the function of what my passions are being expressed towards? And so you are being asked to find the dignity in the daily grind of love as the year closes. Virgo Venus, your love language is helpfulness, precision, and practical devotion, and the Sagittarius transits will form a square to your natal Venus, at least by sign, which could create a little bit of tension this month for you, and so you likely feel that others are being reckless, messy, or too blunt with your heart, or maybe your passions are really not giving you the results that you want, for example, and the chaos of December 10th with Mercury making an opposition to Uranus could disrupt your carefully curated routines or your budget, for example. However, this friction is really necessary to get you to loosen the grip of perfection. And then the turning point is December 24th when Venus moves into Capricorn and makes a trine to your placement. And so suddenly you will feel seen and appreciated for your reliability. Maybe your passions start to actually take off. And then the end of the month is excellent for building, whether it's a relationship structure, a savings plan, or a long-term creative project. And so you really do end the year on a high note. Libra Venus, your love language is harmony, intellectual reciprocity, and aesthetic beauty. And so you benefit from the air and fire mixture this month because Sagittarius Venus is rocking the party. But also the Sagittarius energy does create a sextile to your Venus, at least by sign, which could make social interactions breezy, educational, and fun. And you are looking for partners or passion projects or, a sense of taste that really, inspires your sense of exploration. However, your ruling planet of Venus will be heavily involved in the December 19th confusion of the new moon because it will be making a square to Saturn and Neptune. And so you could find yourself agreeing with things just to keep the peace, only to realize later that you didn't really define the terms clearly, or maybe you have trouble expressing your passions. And then when Venus moves into Capricorn on the 24th, the tone really becomes a little bit more serious. And so you could feel a pressure to define relationships, for example, or lock in a status, or maybe really, take your passions to the next level. And so use this time to ensure that your desire for harmony doesn't come at the expense of your own authority. Scorpio Venus, your love language is intensity, loyalty, merging souls, really putting your all in whatever it is you're passionate about. And Mercury is in your sign until the 11th, which gives you a silver tongue and a sharp mind. And so you are able to articulate your deepest desires with such precision at this time. However, the opposition to Uranus from that transit Mercury on the 10th could suggest a sudden disruption. For example, maybe there's a shocking revelation in your love life or a sudden need to break free from like a really stale dynamic. It could be with your passions as well, because you don't do casual, and the flighty Sagittarius energy of the month could annoy you. And you are waiting for the 24th when Venus enters Capricorn, likely because this earth energy creates a supportive sextile to your water energy, at least by sign, and it validates your need for loyalty, privacy, commitment. Maybe you see your passions actually gaining legs. And then the end of the month is such a powerful time because you can really deepen bonds with those who have proven loyalty, for example, or you can really deepen a bond with a passion project. And so you end the year on a good note. Sagittarius Venus, this is your season because with the Sun, Mars, and Venus all transiting your sign, you are magnetic, visible, full of vitality. Your passions will really, shine. And December 19th is kind of your personal Venus return new moon in a sense. And so it's a once in a year reset of your love life, your self-worth, your aesthetic identity, your taste, and you are planting seeds for the next year of happiness. However, due to the squares from Saturn and Neptune to the new moon, you are in for a little bit of reality check. And so you cannot run on optimism alone. That's what you'll be learning. And the universe is asking you, hey, you want freedom, but can you handle the responsibility that comes with it? And so if you can accept the limitations that Saturn imposes at this time, you can really manifest something real. And if you run away from heavy feelings, you could get lost in the fog of Neptune. Capricorn Venus, your love language is commitment, legacy, and maybe acts of service. And so the first 3 weeks of December could feel like you're in the waiting room per se. And so with planets in the sign before yours, your feelings about love or passions could be a little bit private, reflective, or even a little bit elusive. And you are clearing out old karmic cycles regarding relationships or your passions at this time. But then the shift happens fast because Mars enters your Venus sign on the 15th, which really gives you a massive boost of passion. And you're feeling more ready to express yourself and you are ready to conquer at this time. And then on the 24th, Venus enters your sign. This is your glow up and you will become undeniably attractive and magnetic, or you'll be really into your passions at this time. And so the end of the month is really the time to ask, what do you want? It's a time to set high standards and expect others to meet them because you are embodying the boss energy of love and passion. And this is what you will carry into the new year. Aquarius Venus, your love language is built on friendship or intellectual freedom and uniqueness. You really like to do things your own way, and it is showing in your passions. And the Sagittarius energy works really well with you. It really sparks your passion. It may make you more sociable and it helps you to really connect to causes that feel true to you. And so you could be finding love and value and passion within maybe groups or networks, shared ideals, or like causes that really resonate with you. And the December 4th full moon in fellow air sign of Gemini is such a high point of mental connection for you. You want to be understood, not just adored, and you want your passions to translate, not just to look nice. However, Pluto has recently entered your sign, which is going to be there for a long time. And the December transits are really activating your desire to really redefine yourself and your tastes and your values. And then when Venus enters Capricorn on the 24th, your affections will turn inward. So maybe you value privacy more than usual at the end of the year, or you could find more pleasure in solitude, or rest, or you could start to find more pleasure in undefined connections that don't really fit societal labels. And so take what resonates with that. Pisces Venus, this is a high pressure month for you because with Saturn and Neptune still in your sign and with the Sagittarius planets squaring yours at least by sign, you are feeling the crunch this month, and the external world could feel demanding, loud, and perhaps a little bit aggressive for your sensitive nature. And the December 19th new moon with Venus makes a square to your placement at least by sign, which could highlight a conflict between your need for public expressions of affection and your need for something that is felt very deeply and more internal external. And so the challenge here is boundaries this month. And then Mars making a square to Neptune on the 14th could warn against you sacrificing yourself for a savior complex in love, or maybe you're putting too much into your passions when you really should be resting. And so stand your ground no matter what this month, because when Venus moves into Capricorn on the 24th, that pressure will lift, don't worry. And so your passions and expressions of passions can be built on a foundation that is more stable and grounding, which can really help you start the new year right. Mars in Aries, your ruling planet of Mars will spend the first half of the month in fellow fire sign Sagittarius. Usually this acts as a battery charger which fuels your energy levels and maybe your instinct to take action. However, because Mars makes a square to Saturn on the 8th and Neptune on the 14th, your typical forward thrust could meet a little bit of resistance. You could feel like you're revving the engine with the parking brake on, if that makes sense. And so the mechanic here is friction. Your impulse to move fast could clash with the demand for patience. And then once Mars enters Capricorn on the 15th, your energy will shift from erratic to a little bit strategic. The friction will disappear in like a sense that feels scattered, and it will be more so replaced by a heavy discipline pressure to really produce tangible results. And so that's the energy you have to look forward to this month. Mars and Taurus, the early month transit of Mars and Sagittarius could create a fundamental disconnect for your energy system. Your natal placement values steady, methodical endurance, while the current atmosphere could feel a little bit scattered, rushing, or like it's hitting walls due to Saturn. You may feel your energy is being wasted on theoreticals rather than what's practical, but the relief will arrive on the 15th when Mars enters Earth sign Capricorn, because this forms a supportive trine to your natal Mars, at least by sign, unlocking a massive reservoir of productivity and energy. And the mechanics here shift from feeling frantic and maybe like you're wasting your time and your energy to more grounded efficiency, which really allows you to exert yourself slowly and powerfully way more often without burnout. Mars in Gemini, with Mars transiting your opposing sign of Sagittarius early in the month, you are experiencing a polarization of energy. And this places the focus on external stimuli, which is what oppositions do. So you could feel pushed by outside forces or find your energy dispersed across too many open loops. And the square to Saturn from the 8th to transit Mars could feel or create like this mental or physical block where your usual agility fails to solve the problem that you're trying to tackle. And mechanics dictate that you cannot outrun this pressure, because when Mars moves into Capricorn on the 15th, the vibe will become heavier and you are forced to, go into a funnel, and it requires you to commit to one singular task at a time to see progress. And it's if you do that you can best spend your energy this month. Mars in Cancer, the early month energy of Mars in Sagittarius forms a quincunx to your natal placement, at least by sign, which could create like this itch that you cannot scratch sort of dynamic. And so your drive is usually fueled by emotion and intuition, while the current transits really demand blunt or dry action. Maybe you feel physically out of sync or restless without a clear cause. On the 15th as well, when Mars enters Capricorn and directly opposes your natal Mars, at least by sign, this will kind of begin a more tug-of-war dynamic. You will feel more external stimuli, stimulating your energy levels, or you could, put your energy out there more into the external world. And so you will feel a strong external pressure to be stoic and productive, which could pull against your internal need to act based on how you feel. And so success comes from balancing these opposing forces. Mars in Leo, as a fire sign, the Mars in Sagittarius transit will naturally harmonize with your energy levels, which could offer a boost of enthusiasm. However, the hard aspect between transit Mars and transit Saturn on the 8th could interrupt this flow, so you could feel your ego or your creative drive being stifled by the rules, limitations, or a sense of authority. And the mechanic is restriction. The more you push against the wall, the more tired you will become this month. But the shift into Capricorn on the 15th will change the texture of your drive completely, because it removes more of that flair and that go-getter, action, and demands that you work quietly and methodically. And so your energy becomes less about showing and more about building. And you can really build something great this month if you focus in on that. Mars in Virgo, the first half of December presents like a mechanical challenge for your energy levels because Mars in Sagittarius forms a square to your natal Mars, at least by sign, which could create tension. And your drive really relies on precision and detail, maybe planning for some people, while the transiting energy is broad, messy, and currently confused by Neptune. And so you could feel exhausted by the lack of order or the inability to execute tasks perfectly. But this is a friction point that generates heat, but very little motion. However, the turning point is the 15th when Mars enters Capricorn, because this forms a trine to your placement, at least by sign. So suddenly the gears can start locking into place and your ability to work efficiently, to organize, and to execute complex tasks becomes more restored, and you can really hone in your energy this month to start the new year on a very productive and high energy level. Mars in Libra, with Mars in Sagittarius initially forming a sextile to your placement, at least by sign, this could stimulate your mental drive and your desire to act in coordination with others or even yourself. Maybe you're just more likely to plan your steps. However, the heavy Saturn influence to transit Mars could suggest that your attempts to collaborate or maybe find balance with your energy could be met by the coldness or the blocks, of external forces early in the month. Maybe you struggle to find the right move as well. You could have a little bit of analysis paralysis, but when Mars enters Capricorn on the 15th, it will form a square to your natal Mars, at least by sign, which is high pressure, but the mechanics of this transit will force you to stop weighing options and to simply act, which could feel uncomfortable, but it really, forces decisiveness that could really, carry your life far. And so I would use this energy to be super productive and to make the decisions that, are weighing heavily on you as you go into the new year. Mars in Scorpio, you are ruled by Mars, at least traditionally, so the movements of Mars will impact you very strongly, and the early month transit through Sagittarius could feel disjointed for you. It's like a flighty and superficial energy, but you're very deep and sustained with your energy reserves. I'm already feeling this. Mars is in Sagittarius. I'm a natal Mars in Scorpio. My energy feels weird, and the square to Saturn from transit Mars could suggest a friction where your power feels capped or limited by external circumstances. However, the 15th is a major mechanical upgrade because Mars enters Capricorn, another sign where Mars is at home. It's exalted in Capricorn, and so this places the planet of action in a position of supreme strength that really harmonizes with your fixed, intense, and watery nature, and your capacity for strategic, high-endurance work will be at the peak for the rest of the year and entering the new year strong. Mars in Sagittarius, you're in your Mars return currently, which is technically a time of recharging your batteries and fresh cycles of energy. However, the mechanics can be glitchy because with transiting Mars squaring Saturn on the 8th and Neptune on the 14th, while in your sign, your attempts to launch forward could be hitting some resistance. It's like you're trying to, drive that car, put that foot on the gas pedal, and then the brake is pressed simultaneously and your car freaks out and it doesn't know what to do. And this can lead to physical burnout if you aren't careful. And you are generating massive heat, but could, be met with restriction of movement if you aren't really strategic with how you direct your energy. And then on the 15th, Mars will leave your sign and go to Capricorn, and the feeling of bursting energy will subside, which is really replaced by a grounded, sober ability to actually handle the workload so that you can enter the new year strong. Mars in Capricorn, the first half of the month is kind of a waiting game because Mars is currently in Sagittarius and operates at a speed and a temperature that could feel like an alien or like an alien level of energy to your methodical nature, which often feels like wasted movement. However, on the 15th, Mars will return to your sign where it is exalted. This is great for you because mechanically this is the most powerful transit you can experience for energy levels. If you want to get stuff done, get it done then because your internal drive will align perfectly with the external timing. The friction may disappear and you can gain access to a lot of endurance at this time. You will feel stronger, more decisive, and physically capable of bearing heavy loads that would crush other signs so that you can enter the new year strong and ready to tackle on the world. Mars in Aquarius. The early transit of Mars in Sagittarius generally stimulates your drive for intellectual freedom and future-oriented action. You may feel very inspired with your energy levels at this time. However, the square to Saturn from transit Mars could put a check on this because you could find that your innovative ideas or your need for action could be met with rigid structural resistance. And the mechanic here is kind of like it's pressure testing because the stars are really testing the validity of your actions at this time. And then when Mars enters Capricorn on the 15th, your energy could become less about the concept and more about the construction, and your drive will turn somewhat invisible. It'll turn inward, but it'll still be highly effective because you move from sort of, planning the actions you want to take to really laying the bricks and the mortars and the foundation for actually executing it as you go into the new year. Mars in Pisces. This is a mechanically difficult start to the month because Mars is in Sagittarius, which creates a square to your natal Mars, at least by sign, which could create immediate tension. And to make it more intense, transiting Saturn and Neptune are also in Pisces. They're in the sign of your Mars, and so you are kind of the focal point of a T-square dynamic, at least by sign, meaning you could feel overwhelmed or drained or physically targeted by the demands of life. And your fluid nature is being hammered by harsh reality checks, it feels like, but relief is within reach by the 15th when Mars enters Capricorn because it forms a sextile to your placement, at least by sign, which offers a stabilizing hand, and your energy levels will normalize and you will find a constructive channel for your efforts. But also with Neptune going direct this month, you might be able to apply your energy more properly and it'll feel like you're wasting a lot less of your time, which is a great way to enter the new year. Aries Jupiters, your growth mechanism is fueled by action and courage naturally. However, the specific mechanic of the December 21st Jupiter square Chiron in Aries transit acts as a little bit of a tripwire. Because Chiron is currently in your sign, it's been here for a long time, your natural instinct is to expand aggressively, and this could be triggered with a raw, sensitive wound regarding your identity in some way. Maybe because you can't conquer in the way that you're meaning to this month, and it'll really be brought to the surface. And so the lesson here is that true expansion really requires you to pause and tend to the part of you that feels not good enough or maybe physically vulnerable. But because there still is a trine to Saturn and to a lesser degree Neptune, this kind of offers relief because intuition is the only way to navigate the pain at this time without stopping your growth completely. And so it is something you can lean on. Taurus Jupiter, your mechanism for growth really relies on tangible proof and stability. The month-long trine to Saturn and Neptune in Pisces really dissolves your usual reliance on the material world. You could be feeling more spiritual at this time, and you are being asked to find meaning in the intangible or the unseen or the spiritual, which could feel alien to your grounded nature, but for some reason it's going to work. And then the December 21st square to Chiron from transit Jupiter kind of adds this mechanic of maybe resource insecurity. As you try to expand or grow, maybe you suddenly feel like you don't have enough around this time, whether it's enough time, enough money, or enough energy. And this is a phantom pain that's triggered by this aspect. And so growth this month comes from trusting the flow rather than hoarding supply, so that it's something you can remember. Jupiter and Gemini, your growth engine runs on data, logic, and variety. And so the mechanics of this month interfere with that signal. And so the month-long trine to Saturn and Neptune in Pisces from transit Jupiter could flood your intellectual circuits with non-verbal intuitive information. Maybe you can't quite categorize what you are learning right now. But then the December 21st square to Chiron from Jupiter kind of creates this painful friction in your decision-making process. And you may find that your usual cleverness or your usual, you got everything together, you know everything, that energy could backfire, exposing a vulnerability in how you communicate. And so to expand at this time, don't try to rationalize the experiences and allow yourself to be confused, even if it's just for a moment, because wisdom this month is found in the silence between the facts. Natal Jupiter in Cancer, the December 21st square from Jupiter to Chiron transit. This is going to be a dominant mechanic for you this month because Jupiter is really expanding your nature. You are becoming bigger at this time, but this expansion pushes directly against the wound of yourself with Chiron and Aries. So the more you grow this month, the more you risk triggering an old insecurity about your independence or ability to stand alone, or maybe your confidence. And so the mechanic is growing pains. Simultaneously, though, the month-long trine to Saturn and Neptune in Pisces will provide a massive influx of psychic sensitivity. You are open wide at this time, and the danger is taking on too much, but the opportunity is healing the wound by overwhelming it with compassion in whatever it is that you do. Jupiter in Leo, your natal Jupiter grows through either visibility or expression at the very least, and the December 21st square to Chiron transit could create a mechanical block to your ego. So when you try to shine or seek validation, this feedback loop brings up feelings of rejection or inadequacy, which could be the Chiron wound for you, and the universe could be denying you the applause to really teach you self-validation. But the month-long trine to Saturn and Neptune in Pisces will support this by directing your search for meaning inward. And the expansion mechanic for December is really internal for you. You are growing your spirit, not necessarily your reputation or your portfolio. And so if you perform for an audience or if you perform for other people, it could hurt. But if you create for your soul, it will be so healing. Jupiter in Virgo, your growth mechanism is based on fixing or analyzing and perfecting, and the month-long trine to Saturn and Neptune in Pisces makes it impossible by blurring the details but really setting your intentions straight so you cannot see the flaws clearly enough to fix them potentially, which is the point, but you are determined to do so, and so you are learning to grow through acceptance rather than correction. And then the December 21st square to Chiron transit to Jupiter could suggest that your drive to be useful is actually covering a wound of unworthiness, and so the transit forces a malfunction in your productivity. And so mechanical expansion for you this month only occurs when you really stop trying to be efficient and allow yourself to simply be human and embrace the messy parts of you fully and completely. Jupiter in Libra, your natal mechanism really seeks growth through balance and maybe relationships. You like to relate to others and see things fairly, and that's how you grow. And the December 21st square to Chiron in Aries could create a violent seesaw effect kind of on your self-esteem. I don't mean literally violent, you know what I'm trying to say. And so maybe your attempt to find meaning through others could trigger a painful reminder that maybe you've neglected your own needs in the past, and this will feel super strong this month. And the mechanic is kind of imbalanced, so you cannot smooth things over super easily this month. But what I will say is that the month-long trine from Jupiter to Saturn and Neptune in Pisces kind of like adds a sense of confusion, but also a sense of determination to really grow. And so growth requires you to step off the scale this month and accept that sometimes meaning is found in conflict and not peace. Jupiter in Scorpio, the month-long trine to Saturn and Neptune in Pisces is the primary mechanic that you'll be feeling, which really acts as a superconductor for your natal Jupiter and transit Jupiter. And so your capacity to learn through deep secrets or maybe psychology, really going in the depths, it's frictionless. You feel like you can really dive deep and you can download wisdom effortlessly. However, the square from Chiron to Jupiter on the 21st warns of like a healing crisis that could happen. So maybe you dive deep into the truth, and this could hit a nerve that's sharper than you expected. And so the mechanic is to purge. You are expanding by expelling old toxins, but the act of expulsion will physically or emotionally sting a little bit. And so my advice, lean into that Neptune and Saturn energy truly to wash away the debris. Jupiter in Sagittarius, this is your ruler, it's exalted, and you could be under a little bit of pressure because the December 21st square from transit Jupiter to Chiron in Aries could act as sort of like, a speed bump. So maybe you want to shoot your arrow towards the future, but that Chiron aspect could trigger a crisis of confidence or a physical vulnerability that really shakes your aim. You're not feeling like you're good enough, and you're forced to confront that pain of like taking action or the lack of action you're able to take, perhaps a fear that your actions don't even matter. And then the month-long trine to Saturn and Neptune in Pisces really asks you to get real about your dreams. Why do you want what you want? And it helps give you, the discipline to go towards the dreams that actually matter for you. And so the mechanic for growth is to stop aiming for the horizon and sit with the discomfort of being right here, right now, without an escape route. Jupiter in Capricorn, your growth mechanism really relies on structure, ambition, and really going after things vigorously. And the December 21st square to Chiron to transit Jupiter could attack this a little bit because this transit could trigger a vulnerability where your usual armor could feel a little bit weak. You may find that your ambition is actually hurting you in some way, or that your refusal to show weakness is actually a wound itself. But the month-long trine to Saturn and Neptune in Pisces will erode your foundations with a watery emotion, but it can help you actually build a dream that can sustain. And so this isn't a structural failure, but a really necessary softening to really gear your energy in the correct direction. And so to expand this month, you must let the water in, because growth comes from admitting you are tired rather than pushing harder. Natal Jupiter in Aquarius. Your natal Jupiter grows through detachment, maybe logic, being very futuristic. You like to go towards innovative processes in some way. And the month-long trine to Saturn and Neptune in Pisces could act as a little bit of a short circuit to your logic. So maybe you're receiving downloads that don't really make rational sense, which forces you to rely on faith and to really build off of that faith, which is a mechanic you could be uncomfortable with. And then the December 21st square to Chiron from Jupiter transit really adds a sting to your individuality in some way. So maybe you can attempt to stand apart from the crowd, where you could feel lonely and painful in this process rather than liberated. And so the mechanic for expansion is connection. You are learning that you cannot solve the world's problems if you remain detached from the people who are suffering in it. Jupiter in Pisces, the month-long trine to Saturn and Neptune in Pisces is a harmonic swirling of energy for you. And so your natal mechanism is for spiritual and empathetic growth, and this will be fully activated and supported this month. You are the sponge absorbing the month's wisdom, and you are finding ways to build off of that. However, the December 21st square to Chiron in Aries from transit Jupiter could provide the necessary friction to do so, because without it you would dissolve. And the square acts as a painful reminder of your separate selfhood, because the mechanic is boundaries via pain. You are expanding infinitely this month, but the Chiron transit forces you to recognize where you exist and where you have been hurt in your life, so that you don't completely lose your identity in the collective ocean, and you can use this as inspiration to take your vision further. Aries Saturn, your structure really relies on autonomy, self-starting energy, and the ability to be first. The December 8th Mars square Saturn transit could be a direct hit to your mechanism, because Mars is your planetary ruler, and while the initial sensation is a hand-to-break effect, there's massive benefits here, which is you can strategically compress things. What I mean by that is that you will feel a surge of energy to act, but when it is blocked by physical limitation, you are forced to aim better. The mechanic is not just frustration, it is calibration. The more you push, the harder the wall becomes, but if you pause, you can find the structural weak point in that wall. And then the December 29th Mercury square Saturn transit adds a mental block that could make you doubt your own plans, but this serves a purpose. It stops you from making rash decisions based on impulse, and discipline this month means holding your ground and using the delay to ensure the next strike is precise, not just fast. Saturn in Taurus, your structure is built on endurance, resource conservation, and immovable object energy. The December 8th Mars square Saturn transit kind of creates this mechanic of external friction. Maybe the world around you feels a little bit frantic, but your natal Saturn is designed to withstand this pressure. And while it may feel like you are kind of being pulled by the chaotic actions of others, the positive side is that you act as the anchor of whatever is happening in your life, and you are the buffer that stabilizes the volatility. The December 29th Mercury square Saturn transit could manifest as pessimistic thinking regarding resources, but this is actually a valuable time for you, because the mechanic requires you to ignore the noise and to simply refuse to move, because your discipline is passive resistance. You win by outlasting the transit, proving that your foundations are stronger than the temporary panic surrounding them. Saturn in Gemini, your natal structure organizes life through categories, maybe logic and communication. The December 8th Mars square Saturn transit could create scattered interference in some way, where maybe broad or chaotic energy from Mars and Sagittarius really disrupts your focus. However, the opportunity here is to focus on what's essential. When you can't focus on everything, you are forced to identify the one thing that actually matters, and that is good for you. And the critical moment is the December 29th Mercury square Saturn transit, because Mercury is your ruler, and this mental gridlock kind of acts as a filter, because your logical frameworks could fail to solve the problem problem quickly, but this protects you from executing a flawed plan. And the mechanic is a cognitive stress test of sorts, and so you are being restricted from knowing the answer immediately so that you can dig deeper for the truth. And discipline for you this month means accepting the silence and waiting for the clear signal amidst the static. Saturn in Cancer, your structure is really built on emotional defense, maybe protection, and maintaining a secure perimeter. And the December 8th Mars square Saturn transit kind of acts as this energy where the aggressive energy of Mars really pounds against your walls. It could feel a little bit like a threat, but it is a test of how strong you are. It reveals exactly where your boundaries are weak so that you can repair them. You will feel a need to tighten your defenses, not out of fear, but out of necessary maintenance. And then the December 29th Mercury square Saturn transit could bring harsh words or critical thoughts, but the lesson is to use your shell effectively because the restrictive energy of Saturn really allows you to filter out negativity and keep your internal world sanctified. And so discipline this month is defined by what you choose not to let in, proving to yourself that emotional safety is really under your own control. Saturn in Leo, your structure could support your ego, maybe your creative authority, and your sense of self-worth. The December 8th Mars square Saturn transit could create a mechanic of stifled expression, though, in some way. And so maybe you have the drive to really go after what you want, what sings to your heart, but the Saturn square could deny you that stage per se. And so the constructive advice here is the concept of rehearsal. And so the universe is restricting your output to force you to refine the internal product without the distraction of an audience. And so you're not being rejected at this time, you are being asked to practice. And then the December 29th Mercury square Saturn transit could deliver a critique that feels personal, but it serves as a humility check that really polishes your work, because discipline here means working hard in the dark and trusting that the delays will really lead to a debut that's flawless. Saturn in Virgo, your natal Saturn really creates order through detail, precision, maybe routine. The square between Mars and Saturn on the 8th, though, is a chaotic force that disrupts your carefully laid plans. Mars can be messy, especially in Sagittarius, and it squares your need for perfection, and it also squares Saturn as well. The breaking point also could seem to be around December 29th, though, when Mercury squares Saturn, which could highlight every error in your life. However, the powerful opportunity here is to learn to prioritize things, because when the system fails and you cannot fix everything, you are forced to fix only what you can. And so the mechanic here is it's like a system, update, in the sense that you are being pushed to abandon the rigid perfectionism in favor of something that's more functional and adaptable. And discipline this month is the ability to function amidst disorder and keeping the core machinery in your life running, even if, the aesthetics or, the little nitty-gritty details are a little bit messy. Saturn in Libra, your structure really relies on social contracts, maybe fairness and equilibrium. The December 8th Mars square Saturn transit could create a conflict of interest where maybe some aggressive or self-righteous energy could clash with your need for order and balance, and you cannot referee whatever situation goes on this month in some way, which really forces a necessary pivot of self-reliance. And since you cannot find fair compromises externally as easily this month, you must find it internally no matter what. And the December 29th Mercury square Saturn transit could bring a breakdown in a negotiation, but the mechanic is deadlock for a reason, because you are being restricted from relying on other people so that you can stand in your own authority. And the lesson is that sometimes there is no shared solution, and discipline really means adhering to your own internal code regardless of what the other side says. Saturn in Scorpio, your structure is really built on control, depth, and containment. And the square from Mars and Saturn on the 8th is a high pressure mechanic, because Mars adds the heat and Saturn keeps the lid on, and things can boil over when that happens. But mechanically, this is power regeneration, because you can use this tension to fuel your laser-like focus on a single objective. Figure out what that is. And the restriction really prevents the energy from dissipating, which keeps it concentrated. And then the December 29th Mercury square Saturn transit could suggest that your suspicious nature could turn inward, but this really allows for deep psychological excavation if you let it. And the mechanic is power containment, because you must hold this energy without exploding or letting it get to you. And discipline is the ability to feel the rage but speak none of it and transmute that heat into sheer productivity. That is your goal this month. Saturn in Sagittarius, the December 8th Mars square Saturn transit involves your sign directly. Mars is in Sagittarius, which really drives you to run and expand, while Saturn could feel like it's slamming the door shut. That you may be going through a rough time right now because it's been your Saturn square for a while. And the mechanic is kind of like arrested motion, but the opportunity is vertical growth, because if you cannot move forward horizontally across the map, you must dig down vertically or build that ladder up into wisdom and mastery. And this creates physical restlessness, but it cures superficiality. The December 29th Mercury square as well adds a crisis of belief where the facts may contradict your truth in some way, and so the discipline required is to sit still in the discomfort and to refine your philosophy wherever it's needed. You are being trained to find freedom internally because the external roads are closed, which really strengthens your ideas this month. Natal Saturn in Capricorn. This is where Saturn is at home in. What can I say? And so you understand these heavy mechanics better than anybody. The December 8th Mars square Saturn transit could be a tool for you, because where Mars creates friction, you can use that friction to sharpen your blade in whatever it is that you do. You are the one person who can take the stop energy and turn it into a plan. Use that energy to your advantage. The friction slows you down, but it ensures that you are building on something very solid, not on something that's going to sink. And so also the December 29th Mercury square Saturn transit warns of depressive thinking. You could have, very negative thoughts at this time, but mechanically, this is constructive pessimism. And so you're using the restriction to really identify what is flawed in your life so that you can make it better. And discipline is using the weight of the task to ground you, which turns an obstacle into a stepping stone. And that is your opportunity this month if you use this energy correctly. Saturn in Aquarius, your structure is built on systems, maybe networks, and future-oriented logic. The December 8th Mars square Saturn transit could disrupt your network, with Mars acting a little bit irrationally and breaking the rules of your system, which could feel a little bit scary. And the positive side of this is innovation or potential breakthroughs through isolation. So when the group mind fails or when your ideas fail, you are forced to rely on your own unique individual genius to fix it. And then the December 29th Mercury square Saturn transit could be a communication blackout of sorts, but this silence really allows you to think without influence, let your genius kind of marinate a little bit, And so the mechanic really cuts you off from the hive mind to test your strength and to really test your own theories. And so discipline for you really means standing by your logic even when the data stream is cut off, and trust that your internal, layout is correct even when the network is down. And that is the test you're being put through this month. Saturn in Pisces, the December 8th Mars square Saturn transit really hits your natal placement, at least by sign. And this could feel like your boundaries are being attacked in some way, whereas Saturn really demands that you hold your form. And the mechanic is erosion, but the constructive result of this is that you can crystallize something great. You are under pressure to dissolve, but this pressure really forces your abstract dreams to become solid and tangible, which is great. You are turning water into ice. You're turning it into something solid, and now you can walk on it. And then the December 29th Mercury square Saturn transit could bring a little bit of mental confusion, but this forces you to rely on your intuition rather than something you can explain. And the discipline here is developing a spiritual backbone, because you must remain solid, not because of logic, but because of an inner resolve, and use this pressure to divine exactly where you end and where the world begins. And what do you want to actually build? That is what you're figuring out this month.